Hi guys, my name is L. Lauren and I am the author of the book you're about to listen to. The book this week is my new boss, and it is part of the Unexpected Romance series. That series includes My Father's Business Partner, The Nerd Next Door, and My Brother's Best Friend. I wrote this book probably in 2021, and I was experimenting with writing a little bit shorter than normal and also practicing various tropes. I put a lot of tropes in that I really like for this one. I have a one-night stand. There's an office romance. It's also enemies to lovers a little bit. There are probably more, but I can't remember them all right now. It's been a minute. So with that being said, I'm going to let you get into it, and please leave all of your thoughts and lovely comments down below. Thank you.
My New Sexy Boss. An unexpected romance novel. Written by L. Lauren. Chapter 1. Sidney Powell closed his laptop and spun around in his cubicle, leaning back in his seat and peering over the divider into the cubicle next to him, dark eyes landing on his best friend, Joanne. Ready to blow this joint? He grinned. TGIF, baby. Hang on. I have like 10 minutes of work left, and I don't want to come back to it on Monday. Just give me a second. She adjusted square glasses on her nose, pressing them closer to her thick fake eyelashes, and tapped on her keyboard, looking back and forth from the keys to the screen. Okay, fine. If you're really done with all your work, you could go clean out the break room refrigerator. It has to get done every Friday afternoon. I mean, I could do that, but it's Kate's week, and I like our turn-based system. Sidney rocked in his office chair, combing his shoulder-length dreadlocks into a half ponytail, knotting them around each other in place of a hair tie. Okay, then look over your portfolio introduction for the men's cologne company. The boss is going to want to see it bright and early Monday morning, and you know you're blind to typos. One of my many flaws, Sidney rolled his eyes. You know what, I will, but even if there are a few typos, the boss is going to love it. I'm not worried, and you shouldn't be as worried about yours either. I know, but I can't help it. I think I've gone over the ad copy for the print pieces 100 times now. I wish I had the stuff from the designers so I can see how it looks all put together. Sometimes words just don't fit how they should once you lay the text over the image. I think they're working on it, Joe. You need to take a break. You're getting way too stressed out about this. I'm not. I just want it perfect. Right, but sometimes good enough is better than perfect. Sidney shrugged and stood up, shouldering his briefcase and dipping into his friend's cubicle. He scanned over the woman's walls, eyes landing on a collection of family photos. Joanne had a huge family. In the center of all the photos was a photograph of her and one of their co-workers, Dean. So, how are you and Dean doing? Oh, it's been 6 months and we're going strong. He's so sweet, and my parents even like him, which is a shocker because he's white, and you know how my parents can be. Actually, I don't. Joanne shrugged. They just want me to date another Asian person, preferably Chinese. That's all. Anyway, I'm done since you're clearly going to keep bothering me until I stop working. Everything I do in life is for you, honey. Sidney lifted her pink laptop bag off the ground and handed it to her. So what are your grand weekend plans? Oh, tonight I have dinner with my father, and then tomorrow I have a date with Dean. She accepted her laptop bag, and they headed to the building's exit, taking the elevator down 3 levels and strolling through the carpeted lobby. What about you? Oh, my mother's off visiting one of my aunts, so I have the whole apartment to myself for a change. I promise I never pictured my adult life, still hiding my extracurriculars from my mother. You're getting laid this weekend? 100%. I'm going to go home, take a shower, and then see who's up for a little adult playtime. Where do you find these hookups? On the best gay dating app this year. If it's a dating app, why are you having hookups? Because boys will be boys and I love boys. Sidney winked. You want to help me look while we're on the bus? Joanne bit her bottom lip, braiding her hair. I don't know. Oh, come on. I promise you won't be disappointed. I don't know. I have Dean, so should I really be looking at guys on a dating app? You're helping me decide who I want to play with for the night. It'll be fun. He took a seat at the bus stop and pulled out his cell phone, opening the app and presenting it to his friend. She took the cell phone and fixed her dark eyes on the screen. Do you have any specifications? If there's no face pic at all, swipe left. Also, try to make sure he's single. Will it say it all on the app? Yeah, you'll have to read their bios though. My God, if there's no bio, just swipe left too. He needs to have the ability to string words together to form sentences. His friend chuckled. Okay. For a hookup, you have so many rules. I like to think my rules are average and modest. Sure. Joanne swiped through several men before pausing and tilting her head. This guy. She presented the cell phone to Sidney. Nope. Why not? He says he's conservative. Sidney swiped to the left and handed the cell phone back to Joanne. Do you think you'll ever settle down with a long-term partner or something? Honestly, not really. I'm not looking for all that. I have my friends and my family, and y'all are everything I need. Sure, but you can't get nightly cuddles and intimate love from friends and family. Who says I need intimate love? The public transportation bus rolled to a stop in front of them, sighing as it lowered. Joanne boarded first, swiping her card, and Sidney hopped on afterwards, doing the same before finding a seat in the middle of the bus. They rested their bags over their laps as Joanne continued swiping through prospects. I think you do. Hooking up all the time has made you jaded. No, a series of shitty relationships has made me jaded. Well, you have to kiss a few frogs before you find your prince. Or, Sidney drawled, I can pass on the whole institution of relationships and continue with my occasional hookups. Have you found anyone yet? Nope. Wait. She squinted, browsing through pictures before passing the cell phone to Sidney. Maybe him? He took his cell phone and looked at the screen. The first picture was of a man in a suit, looking neat and pressed. What caught Sidney's eye was the outline of his manhood beneath his suit jacket. It was easy to miss if someone wasn't looking for it, but hard to ignore once found. The next several pictures were of a stoic man with wavy brown hair and shockingly blue eyes. He had a square jaw, milky skin, and full pink lips. He even had a modestly filled-out biography. New in town, looking for someone to hook up with. I play as hard as I work, and I work damn hard every day. Sidney licked his lips. Yeah, maybe him. He looks fun and looks like he could make a good boyfriend too. Joe. I'm not looking for a boyfriend. Do I have to tell you again? No, I heard you, but I'm saying he looks nice. It's the nice ones that always get you. Sidney scrolled through the man's pictures again, chewing the inside of his cheek and memorizing the stranger's features. Joanne wasn't wrong. The man's blue eyes were a pair Sidney would have been happy to gaze into for the rest of his life, but it wasn't that kind of thing. The stranger was looking for a good time, and so was Sidney. Are you going to swipe right or what? You're rushing me. Sidney lifted his eyebrows, batting his eyelids. Yes. I want to see if you two match. I may not know immediately. Is this you being nervous? Joanne reached over, flicking her finger across the screen and pushing the stranger's photo to the right. A green stamp flashed over the photograph, and a few seconds later the screen changed, connecting them together with a flashing "You're a match" tag. Yay, Sidney replied, heart jumping into his throat. He didn't know how to feel about this match. Normally he didn't care much, but for some reason he kind of liked this stoic stranger. Are you going to send him a message? Nope. Joanne blinked. Why not? Because he looks like the type to want to message first. He looks like a top, or at least it's the way he's presented himself. How the hell do you know that? Easy. Bottoms usually show their ass. Literally. Oh. So because he didn't show his actual butt, he must be a top. Probably. Can I ask what you show? Joanne's olive cheeks flushed. I show both. Oh. Smooth. You can be both? It's all about my mood and the other person. I'm not going to lay down for just anyone, but this guy. This guy? Yeah, I'd probably let him fuck me. Sidney stashed his cell phone away. Anyway, I'll let you know how it goes. This is where I get off. So apropos. He kissed her cheek as the bus slowed to a stop. I'll see you Monday. Have fun with Deanie tomorrow. Thanks. You have fun with your sexy stranger tonight. Count on it. Sidney winked. He strolled off the bus and walked 10 blocks to his apartment, jogging to the second floor and unlocking the door. His mother had taken the weekend to visit her sister a few states away. Her sister had recently been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had surgery to remove the lumps Tuesday. She left the hospital a few days later, but his mother wanted to stay with her as long as possible. Sidney missed his mother, but he wasn't sad about having the place to himself. In fact, he was elated. It was a rare occasion that he got the chance to fuck in his own space. Usually he had to go to the other person's house, and that came with all sorts of risks. He dropped his briefcase by the door and peeled out of his suit, draping his clothes on the back of the couch as his cell phone buzzed in his pocket. He retrieved it and looked at the screen. One notification from the app. Sidney sucked in his breath, heart turning over again, and opened it. The stranger had sent a message. Hey there. What's going on? The notification read. Simple and clean. Sidney appreciated it. Not much. I just got home from work and was about to get in the shower, Sidney replied. Oh yeah? Hard day? No lol. I work in an office. Sidney tied all of his hair up as he moved into the bathroom. Sexy. Is it too late for a picture of you in your office attire? Sadly, yes. I'm already undressed, naked, and about to be soaking wet. The conversation stalled for a moment, and Sidney smirked. The ellipsis dots appeared and disappeared on the screen as he waited. Eventually, he discarded his cell phone and climbed into the shower. The cell phone dinged with a new message halfway through his shower, but he ignored it until he stepped out. He snapped a picture of his water-covered chest, covering his cock with a fluffy gray towel. Sounds lovely, the stranger replied. Sidney chuckled. It was. He sent the picture. He rendered the stranger, figuratively, speechless again. And he smiled. You are very sexy, the stranger started. As I stated, I am new in town. Perhaps we could meet for drinks? Ah, you're going to make me get dressed again? Unfortunately, but maybe I'll be able to rip those clothes off later in the evening? Sidney chuckled. Maybe. If you're lucky. Meet me at the Bulldog on Magazine in 2 hours. Indeed, the man replied. Chapter 2. He sent his last message to the sexy, dark-skinned man with the username Sid69 and looked across the meeting room table, returning his attention to the older man across from him. The man adjusted his glasses on his nose and reviewed a stack of papers before nodding. He added his signature to the bottom of the paper. Congratulations, his voice rattled. You're the new owner of the most innovative advertisement company this side of the river. The old man smiled, showing off eerily white teeth. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I'll clean my desk out over the weekend, so it's ready for you Monday morning. Mr. Murphy stood up, draping his suit blazer over his forearm and walking around the table. His private lawyer stood as well, buttoning his jacket and following the older gentleman. Warren Brooks stood to his feet, administering the man a firm handshake and a slight nod. Ah. I can't wait to take your organization further. Thank you for accepting my pitch. Your growth plan is superb. I am happy to retire as a shareholder in a company I built from the ground up." Warren nodded and walked Mr. Murphy to the door. Their lawyers followed behind them. He had an hour and a half to figure out where the bulldog was and get there. He glanced at his older counterpart, considering asking the gentleman, but he decided against it. What if the bulldog was a well-known gay club? Warren didn't want the older gentleman in his affairs. Mr. Murphy veered away from him once they exited the building, approaching a sleek silver pickup truck. Warren walked up to his own vehicle, a stretched luxury sedan in a sparkling blue. He sank into the front seat and closed the door behind him, dipping into traffic and sitting in rush hour until he circled the city and pulled up to the bar. He was 20 minutes early, and he spent 10 of those minutes fitting his vehicle into an on-street parking space. He spent 5 of those minutes peering at himself in the mirror. He should have left the stubble this morning. He combed his fingers through his hair and loosened his tie, tossing it on the passenger seat. After unbuttoning the top button of his shirt and rolling up his sleeves, cuffing them right before his elbow, he climbed out of the vehicle and moved inside the bar, finding a seat in a booth and directing his attention to the door. Warren glimpsed his cell phone, clenching his jaws as he browsed through the previous messages. His stranger had 5 minutes to appear. No, he'd give him 10 minutes in case he was one of those people with no sense of time. "I'm here," he messaged Sid69. The man sent back a thumbs-up emoticon. OMW. Warren nodded and turned his cell phone face down, latticing his fingers together as he peered around the establishment again. His attention lingered on a row of laughing women at the bar, ordering rainbow drinks with sliced fruit and straws. A bachelorette party, perhaps. The bartender flirted with them, working them for higher tips as he kept their drinks filled. When the entrance opened, Warren dragged his attention away from the women and looked at the door. A muscular man with shoulder-length dreadlocks and an easy smile walked into the establishment. The man's dark eyes scanned the area before they landed on Warren. He smiled more, and his warm brown eyes swallowed the dim light in the room. They sparkled, and this stranger stole Warren's breath. His pulse accelerated as the man approached his booth. "Hello," he cleared his voice and stood up. The stranger was barely an inch shorter than him. The perfect height. His t-shirt fit tight on his broad shoulders, and he smelled like coconut and cedar. "Hey there," the stranger teased, giving him a lopsided grin. "Sidney." "Brooks?" Warren extended his hand. Sidney smiled even more and shook it. His grip was strong, and he tickled Warren's palm when he pulled away. "What can I get you?" "You're buying my drink?" "Well, you look kind of silly sitting here with nothing in front of you. So what'll it be?" "You look like a bourbon kind of guy." "Is that good or bad?" "Nothing, it's just what I expected." "You're calling me predictable?" "Maybe." Sidney's cheeks dimpled. "Is it a problem? Is there something wrong with being predictable?" "It depends, I suppose. Bourbon would be fine, yes." "I think I'm going with rum and coke." "I'm not really a drinker, but," Sidney started, paused, and shook his head. "I'm not really a drinker." "A rum and coke is nice. It tastes like a spicy soft drink." Warren explained, touching Sidney's back as they moved to the bar. Sidney wasn't usually a drinker, and Warren wasn't usually the one signing on for hookups. They were both trying new things. When Sidney reached the bar, he stood one stool down from the bridal party and eyed the bartender, luring him over with his infectious smile. Warren studied Sidney's full lips as he ordered both of their drinks and handed cash to the worker. "Thank you." "No problem. So you're new here. What for?" Sidney turned around and leaned against the bar, stretching his already tight shirt and showing the hard cuts of his body. The shirt bunched under his pectoral muscles and highlighted his rippling abdominals. Warren hissed as Sidney's movements dragged his attention downward. His mouth watered as the man's shirt lifted, revealing a sliver of swarthy skin and a few curls of hair. A promise of more. Ah. A new business endeavor. What kind of endeavor? Warren narrowed one eye, almost winking. "Do you really want to hear about my job on a Friday evening?" "Maybe," Sidney drawled. A southern twang touched his voice. Maybe hearing about it turns me on. Somehow I doubt that would be the case. Your suit picture was my favorite, though. For the suit or for other? Warren paused. Reasons? Both, but not the reasons you think. Enlighten me. The bartender returned with their drinks, sliding the bourbon to Warren and the rum and coke to Sidney. Sidney tasted it, wrinkling his nose as the liquid hit his tongue. It's not good. Warren lifted his eyebrows. It's strong. Ah. You could request another with less rum and more coke. Nah. I'll drink it just slowly. I liked your expression and your eyes, which is surprising because I'm not usually an eyes guy. I see. But I liked your cock too. You're hung for a white guy. Warren rolled his eyes. Thank you, I think. What? Look. I'm not saying I believe there's any truth to size discrepancies, but I'm just saying I don't usually get so lucky. Noted. You're very good looking, too. Sidney's playful grin melted into something softer. You're kinda sweet. Is this your first time hooking up? It's my first time using an app. Ah. It shows. He sipped his drink again. So, you didn't put the important things on your profile. I'm negative for everything. Good. Me too, but we're still using protection. Warren nodded. Good. He sipped his drink, mirroring Sidney's movements. I purchase and rebuild businesses, usually businesses that have been static for some time. The owners will tire of them, and I will purchase them and develop a growth plan that makes the shareholders and employees happier. Why does it make the employees happier? Because they get raises and more time off, because I have made the organization more efficient. Ah. So you like to fix things that are broken? Is this a personality question? It can be. If things are people, then no. I am not a therapist or a doctor. Good answer. Sidney sucked his bottom lip and twisted his body, gazing into Warren's eyes. The other man was silent for dragging moments, and Warren drowned in the depths of his cavernous brown eyes. There were layers to this stranger. Layers under his playful facade. Sidney looked away first. His cheeks darkened, and he focused his attention on his drink, stirring it with his straw and taking another sip. So, what are you looking for? Tonight? A good time. In general. I'm open. Another good answer. The dark-skinned man flashed a smile. Thank you. What are you interested in? Sidney twirled his straw again, staring into his drink. Tonight. I'm interested in, he paused, considering his response with a sly little smile, being under you. You look like you can give a long, hard fuck, and I'm interested. Warren's breath hitched at Sidney's confession. He wasn't sure why it surprised him. After all, they had been on a hookup app, but Sidney was shameless and bold, two things Warren wasn't used to. Ah, he cleared his throat perhaps. Modest. I like it. Overconfidence is a killer. So do you want to come back to my place? You have no other questions for me. Sidney flicked his eyes to the left and to the right, before settling on Warren again. You said your name is Brooks, huh? Yeah. Okay, nope. No other questions. I'll text you my address. Sidney downed the rest of his drink and pushed himself away from the bar. Do you have any more questions for me? I suppose I don't. Alrighty then. I'll see you in a few. He breezed back out of the bar, leaving Warren to his half-finished drink and the lingering woodsy scent of his cologne.
Hey guys, it's me again. I'm not gonna hold you. I hope that you are enjoying the story so far. If you are, please subscribe to my channel. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and right now we're at exactly 628. I can't reach 1,000 subscribers without you, so if you want to support me and help me out, hit that subscribe button. Anyway, I'll let you get back to the story. Cheers.
Chapter 3. Sidney rode back to his apartment in the back seat of a taxicab, texting Warren the address once he was midway to his place. He needed to arrive first, stash away his mother's fashion magazines, and hide any other telling items in his mother's bedroom. He had to do one last look around his place. His first impression of Warren was great. The man seemed normal enough, not overly arrogant, and he was incredibly attractive as well. Warren replied to his message with a simple thumbs-up emoticon, and when Sidney stepped out of the taxicab and entered his apartment, his heart jumped in his throat. His pulse accelerated, and he drummed his fingers on his leg. He had hooked up with relative strangers many times, but usually not in his own place. Having the stranger at his place made the whole thing more intimate, more vulnerable. Plus, this stranger couldn't kick him out if he suddenly wasn't feeling it. Or well, he could, but it's harder to kick someone out than it is to decide to leave. Sidney tucked his mother's magazines away and wiped down the coffee table. He fluffed the couch pillows and tucked a strip of condoms in his pocket. Just in case. Then he glanced at his cell phone. No message from Warren. As he studied the screen, the ellipsis appeared. True to the other man's fashion, they disappeared several times before a message appeared on their private chat. "I'm downstairs," it read. Sidney messaged him the apartment number and went to the door, opening it and leaning against the frame. Arms crossed over his chest, he smiled as Warren ascended the stairs. His heart pounded against his ribcage. "So this is my place." He bit his bottom lip as he stepped aside and ushered Warren into his living room. "It's a nice complex," Warren complimented diplomatically, with an unreadable expression on his tanned features. "Thank you. Do you have roommates?" Sidney scanned the room. "No one's going to interrupt us." He closed the door behind Warren. "Can I get you something to drink?" "No, thank you." A light smile touched Warren's face, and he strolled around the living room, limiting his obvious curiosity to the room he originally entered. He surveyed the framed pictures on the wall as he unbuttoned his shirt. "Do you mind if I get more comfortable?" "Not at all." Sidney's eyes fixed on Warren's thick hands and his manicured nails. He wet his lips as the man snaked out of a soft blue button-down shirt, resting it over the back of the couch and leaving himself in a t-shirt and slacks. "What kind of movies do you like?" I don't watch a lot of television. I'm more of a reader." Warren made his way around the room and finally collapsed into the couch, occupying half of the space. Sidney joined him, kicking his feet up on the coffee table and grabbing the remote. "I could play music then." "Sure." Warren nodded. His blue eyes stared into the side of Sidney's face. "You don't normally have people here, do you?" Sidney pressed a few buttons, and soft music filtered through the speakers flanking the television. "Honestly? Nope, not usually. It's different having someone else in your space. If you at any point want me to leave, you can tell me so, and I will." "Noted. Does it work the same if I want you to stay?" "Sure," Warren chuckled. "Good. Because right now I really want you to stay. You're interesting. Not the usual hookup fodder." "Thank you, I believe." Warren relaxed with the music, resting one hand on the back of the couch and stretching out his broad chest. His thumb brushed against Sidney's shoulders, and Sidney shivered. Goosebumps rose over his skin. "Yeah. It's a compliment." "This is good." The man's voice roughened, and his touch casually graduated from accidental to massaging Sidney's neck. "What do you do for fun?" Sidney leaned into his touch. "We're getting to know each other now." "Small talk before you get in my lap." Warren's bright blue eyes sparkled. "I'm going to get in your lap." Sidney laughed. "How else are you going to ride my cock? This is what I'm here for, right?" "Oh. Yeah. Okay." Sidney's pulse raced at Warren's quip. "I like hanging out with my friends. Going places. Doing things. Social stuff. What about you?" I am more the quiet type. My job requires me to be very social, so once I leave my job, I prefer to spend time alone or in the company of one or two close friends. His touch continued along Sidney's jawline. Sidney ignored it. What do you do when you're alone? Read. Listen to music. Work on a project. A work project? No, Warren chuckled, a side project. Passion project, some people say. His thumb crept along Sidney's jawline until the rough pad stroked over his lips. Sidney parted them with a sigh, eyes drooping closed. Passion project. Warren replaced his exploring fingers with his mouth, browsing Sidney's neck and dotting kisses along his skin, seeking out his lips. He kissed one corner of Sidney's lips, brushed across them, and kissed the other corner. Sidney moaned. What are you working on right now? Warren planted his hands on the back of the couch, caging Sidney with his body as he dipped his head for another kiss. Oddly chaste but hungry. He rumbled. Right now? Ah. I am working on a growth plan for a local animal shelter. It's donated work. His steamy breath tickled Sidney's skin as he spoke. You donate work? Yes. Sexy and sweet, Sidney murmured against Warren's lips before he captured the man in a deeper kiss. He lifted his hands to Warren's sides, sliding them over his hips. Fingers thumbed the hems of Warren's undershirt, slipping under the fabric and touching the man's bare skin. Warren's abdominals rippled, tightening. A non-committal noise. He didn't agree or disagree, but he kept his attention on Sidney, traveling away from his face and down the thick column of his neck. Soft lips stippling kisses over his skin until Sidney's shirt blocked his path. He tugged at the fabric. Undress. Sidney sank back against the couch, releasing Warren's shirt and rolling his body up to him. Their hips connected. Sidney felt the hard ridge of the stranger's cock through his slacks. It pulsed against him. The man growled, undress. I don't like repeating myself. His blue eyes sparkled. He was playful, with a hint of edge. Sidney's heart fluttered, and he sat back again, crossing his arms over his body and ripping his shirt over his head. He thumbed the button of his jeans, pushing them off his hips. Those two. Warren tipped his head to Sidney's briefs, licking his lips as his attention focused on them. The violet head of Sidney's cock poked over the loose band of his underwear, and glistening pre-cum stained his dark skin. Sidney shivered, arching his back as he peeled his briefs down. He was naked, completely exposed in front of the other man, and it brought color to his cheeks. Excitement swirled inside him as Warren's eyes scanned over his body. He liked the way this stranger looked at him. Appreciative, hungry, possessive. Do you like what you see? Sidney whispered, flicking his eyes up to Warren's tight features. Yes, the other man replied. He made no moves toward shedding his own clothes. Instead, he adjusted Sidney's position, spreading him across the couch and hovering over him. After another desperate kiss, Warren explored Sidney's body, sweeping his lips over his shoulders, down the shape of his pectoral muscles. His lips breezed over Sidney's hardened nipples, down his abdominals, and paused at his navel, turning his eyes up to Sidney. His pink lips curved into a devilish smirk as he pressed them into Sidney's cock. He mouthed him, laving his tongue over steamy skin. He closed his lips around Sidney, hollowing his cheeks as he sucked him into his mouth. Sidney groaned. The sight of the still-clothed man between his legs, lips shining with spit, turned him on. His cock kicked in the trap of Warren's mouth, dripping pre-cum on the man's tongue, and he combed his fingers through Warren's hair, caressing his chin. The man retreated, licking swollen lips as he regarded Sidney, debating something as he groped Sidney's cock. He jerked it and squeezed it, prying soft whimpered from Sidney's lips. Sidney wasn't used to the roughness, but he liked it. Warren swatted Sidney's hand away as he returned his mouth to his cock, devouring him and falling into an easy rhythm. He swallowed him down, pushing Sidney's cock into his throat, and he stroked him as he pulled back. With Warren's expert touch and skilled throat, Sidney's orgasm raced up on him. His cock betrayed him, throbbing in Warren's mouth and overflowing with pre-cum. Fuck, Sidney gasped as Warren's free hand slipped between his muscular thighs, groping his sack and brushing his fingers over his hole. Sidney's eyelids fluttered closed, and he rested his head on the back of the couch. A guttural moan rattled his throat, and his cock flexed. More pre-cum. He was on edge, trembling from his head to his toes. His thighs quaked and his fingers balled into fists, nails scraping the couch's braided fabric and then stabbing his palm. Warren retreated again, slapping Sidney's throbbing cock and wringing a sharp moan from him. "Tell me when you get close. I'll decide if I'm ready for you to come." Sidney's eyes shot open and his body straightened up. Wah! Lightning bolted through his body. The sting from the slap shot through his nerve endings, setting them ablaze. "You heard me." Warren's words were buttery smooth even as they housed a threat. Sidney's eyes rolled. "We're playing like that tonight." "We are." Sidney's pulse galloped and his cock flexed again. A new desire settled inside him. He wanted to please this stranger. He wanted to be good and sweet and sexy for him. "I've never." "Never." Sidney shook his head. "No, never. What do I do?" "When you get close, tell me." Warren cradled Sidney's cock with appreciation and love in each stroke. "Okay." Sidney cleared his throat. "I'm close. It's going to be a long night for you." He chuckled, sweeping a bead of pre-cum from the head of Sidney's cock and tasting it. Warren sucked Sidney's cock until shivers racked Sidney's body. Each taste sent harsh waves of pleasure down his spine, until he broke and whispered the words Warren wanted. "Close," Sidney whined, pushing his shoulders into the couch while lifting his hips and spreading his legs apart, welcoming more treatment. Warren slapped his cock again. Sidney's head spun. He squeezed his eyes shut. He could come. This stranger was no one to him. He would never see him again if he didn't play by his rules, his mind reasoned, but when he opened his eyes again, his thoughts dissolved. He licked his lips, staring at his cock as pre-cum leaked from him. The head of his cock pulsed and his sack tightened. "Please." He swiped his tongue over his lips again and humped the air. His body begged for Warren's touch. "Turn over." Sidney stared, inhaling shallow breaths before he complied. Bracing himself with shaking hands, he flipped from his back to his hands and knees, gripping the arm of the couch. He peered at Warren over broad shoulders. The look in the other man's blue eyes was pure pleasure, and the man sat behind him for what felt like ages before he moved again. He ran his rough hands over Sidney's dark skin, down the outside of his thighs and back up the inside, skipping over his genitals in favor of the other leg. Sidney danced, spreading his legs further apart and arching his back. Sweat collected on his tingling skin. Nerves fired at all cylinders. Warren massaged Sidney's hole, pressing his thumb inside him dry. "Fuck," Sidney panted. "I want to come." Warren replied and replaced his hand with his mouth, tonguing Sidney's hole. Strong hands gripped Sidney's full ass cheeks and ripped them open, exposing him to more of Warren's rough treatment. His excitement burned between his hips, and he arched his back again. His cock swung between his thighs, slapping his belly. "Ah," Sidney groaned, spreading his legs apart. His hips sagged until his cock dented the couch cushions, and even that simple touch made him ache. "Oh God, please." "You're begging?" "Yes." Sidney pressed his cheek into the arm of the couch. He lowered his shoulders and surrendered his ass to Warren. "It sounds lovely." Sidney knit his eyebrows together, sucking his bottom lip. Warren's hand came down on his ass in a hard but affectionate slap, and then he came up behind him. The pressed fabric of his slacks brushed over Sidney's sweaty thighs, and the cool metal of his belt shocked his blazing skin. The businessman nestled himself between Sidney's ass cheeks as he tore open a condom with his teeth. "Hold off a little bit longer for me, sexy," Warren purred as he fished the condom out and slid it over his cock. "Ah," Sidney groaned, exhaling in a heavy sigh as Warren invaded him. Chapter 4. Warren fucked Sidney until the other man came again, and begged for a third time, reveling in Sidney's passionate moans. Those brought Warren closer to the edge faster than anything else, and he filled the condom with a load. They collapsed on the couch for 30 minutes, with Sidney leaning against his chest, curled into him, as Warren processed everything that had happened. Then they went again, grinding against each other, until Warren dragged a fourth orgasm from Sidney, and a second orgasm from himself. They fell into a deep sleep after the last round, with Sidney again tucked against his side, head on his chest and arm draped across his body. Warren wrapped an arm around Sidney's shoulders, rubbing his smooth mahogany skin. He could have left. They hadn't played hard enough for Sidney to need aftercare, but there was a connection. Warren hadn't planned any of the extras. It was supposed to be a quick fuck, nothing more than that, but Sidney followed his command. Not just followed, but enjoyed it. He was putty under Warren's words and an eager kitten under his touch. The businessman couldn't resist, so it happened. And it had been grand. Warren woke the next morning with Sidney's body curled around him and his arms gripping his torso. He wasn't sure how their bodies had morphed into those positions, but Warren was at home in Sidney's arms. He dozed in and out of sleep for a few minutes before reluctantly easing out of Sidney's arms. Once on his feet, he visited the bathroom before browsing the man's apartment. The place was small, a postage stamp compared to his own place, but homey. Family photographs covered the wall and the refrigerator. They were all of Sidney and an older woman who shared his lopsided, sparkling smile. His mother, Warren guessed. He washed his hands and opened the refrigerator, pulling out a half carton of eggs and pre-sliced vegetables. He turned them into omelets. He slid them into a plate and sprinkled them with salt and pepper as Sidney appeared, knuckling puffy eyes. "You made breakfast?" Sidney ventured, standing in the kitchen doorway and palming his half-mast cock. "Yes. For you." Warren lifted a plate, presenting it to him. "Must have been a really good fuck, because I've never had a man make me breakfast the next morning." Warren chuckled. "It was nice, yes. Thanks for breakfast." Sidney accepted the plate and sat his bare ass down at the kitchen table. Warren wet his lips. A moment. He ducked out of the kitchen, digging his briefs out of his slacks and sliding them on before he sat across from him. He wasn't putting his bare bottom in someone else's chair. "I figured you would be hungry this morning." "Yeah," Sidney paused, slicing the omelet into sections. "Most people are hungry in the morning." The businessman smiled. "Yes?" He sliced his omelet as well and ate. "So, what are your plans for the day?" "I hadn't made any yet. It's Saturday, but my best friend has a date with her boyfriend today, so we're obviously not hanging out. My mother's out of town for the weekend too, and she usually drags me shopping Saturday mornings. She loves garage sales, and she thinks I am naturally gifted at picking out clothing and interiors because I'm gay." "Are you?" Sidney snorted. "Okay, well, I'm not bad at it, but it has nothing to do with my sexual preferences. I just don't think certain things go together. But not the things you'd expect. Like, I'm okay with someone wearing black clothes and brown shoes if they can pull it off and not be self-conscious about the whole thing. It's the same with mixing patterns. You can definitely mix patterns too, but you can't be insecure about it." "I see. Your thoughts on my attire? Right now or from last night?" The other man flashed a grin. "The other night. It was fine. It fits you, but it was a bit boring." "You are saying I'm boring." "No, I'm saying your clothing choices are. I mean, you might be boring, but I'm not sure yet because I don't know you well enough to say. Your clothing choices are safe, that's all." "I see, and if you were to dress me?" "Oh, I wouldn't dress you. I like looking at your ass too much." The apples of Warren's cheeks flushed at Sidney's compliment, and Warren looked down at his food, picking at the last half of his omelet and swirling it around his plate. "Thank you. Are you really blushing right now? You're kidding, right? You had my mind spinning from the second you got my clothes off. My balls still ache a little bit, and you're blushing now. I thought you were all big-time dominant guy. Mr. Alpha, right?" Warren wrinkled his nose and cleared his throat, sitting back in the chair again. "I suppose you could say that. I'm sorry. I didn't know there was another way to say it because you were the one introducing games to what I thought was going to be a quick fuck. I mean, I figured you were going to want to be the one in charge, but I expected something tame. I figured you'd do some typical shit of demand I call you daddy, or tell you how big and amazing your cock is. Which, by the way, it is both very thick and very amazing," Sidney purred. Warren finished his meal as Sidney rambled, looking up again when the other man mentioned his cock. I would never demand you call me daddy. Well? Noted. But I'm just saying. It was a welcome surprise. You in bed was a welcome surprise. As were you, Warren replied after collecting both of their plates and depositing them in the sink. He rinsed them and stashed them away, leaving the kitchen cleaner than he had originally found it. Have you ever subbed before? With his back facing Sidney, he turned his head to the side, cutting his eyes to the other man and craning his ears for a reply. Why? You're not going to get off on my prior experiences, are you? No. You're not trying to find an elusive perfect submissive to train either, are you? No. It's conversation. Nothing more. Okay, Sidney's skepticism seeped into his voice. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. No, it's fine. I don't think I've subbed before, not like last night. In my last relationship, the guy was controlling and he wanted certain things. Warren prompted as he set his jaws. He didn't like Sidney's ex-partner, and his visceral reaction surprised him. Sidney was still a stranger, so why did he care? He wanted me to always be ready for him. Like always, and he always wanted to go in bare. I mean, it was fine, I guess, because we were both clean. Or Warren lifted his eyebrows. Elaborate. He meant it as a question, but it came out as a statement. He cared. Damn, he cared. I found out he was cheating on me, but I'm clean. I stopped sleeping with him right after I found out. I wanted to at least try to repair things between us, but he got mad. It went south. And then there was this amazing fight, and it was a lot. Sidney picked at his nail beds. The man who had been smiling and playful not 5 minutes ago was now shut off. Warren felt the energy shift. My apologies. You remind me of him, actually. I would never cheat on you, and I would never expect you to always be ready for me. Right. I wasn't talking about those things. I meant the way you dress and Sidney paused skin. Oh. He was right. I see. Warren cleared his throat. I would say something akin to not all of us are like that, but I know it's an unhelpful statement. It really is, but I get it. Here's a better one. Never tell me his name, because I will be arrested for assault if you do. Warren turned back to the kitchen counter, eyebrows furrowing. Do you like coffee? Sidney coughed. Okay. Got it. Yeah, I got it. I don't like coffee, but there's some medium dark roast in the cabinet. It's all we have. We? Sidney winced. Yeah. We. I live with my mom. Or technically she lives with me since I pay all the bills here. It is just you and her. Yeah. Sidney shifted in his seat, tucking his hands between his thighs. Nervous. Now he was nervous. Anyway, the coffee's in the cabinet there. He tipped his head. Warren moved around the kitchen, opening the cabinet and pulling down the opened bag of coffee. He sniffed it and wrinkled his nose. This will not do. How long has this been up here? Maybe a while? Sidney lifted his eyebrows, biting his lip over a smile. This definitely won't do. I believe I saw a little coffee place on the corner. Would you like to join me, and we continue this conversation during a little walk and a gourmet drink? You're going to go out in your walk of shame clothes? I am walking, but there's no shame. Sidney smirked. Okay then. Sure. Let me get dressed. He stood up and approached the kitchen exit, pausing at the doorway and glancing back at the stranger. Chapter 5. To Sidney's surprise, Brooks, the sexy stranger, spent the whole day Saturday with him. They chatted for hours over coffee, then the man paid for his dinner downtown at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Sidney had suggested a cheaper place, but the man insisted, and they sat across from each other over a candle-lit dinner. Sidney felt some type of way. And that type of way was special. Treated. He was used to the money, but he wasn't used to Brooks's honesty at the same time. Both together was amazing, but it scared him too. Dinner hadn't been cheap. Did this stranger now think Sidney owed him more nights of sex? Had the coffee and the meal really been a gift, or did he sign an invisible contract to keep the relationship going? It didn't matter. The truth was, now that they parted ways, he never had to speak to the man again if he didn't want to. He could erase their app message thread along with his address and never talk to him again. Sidney scrolled through their first messages as he relaxed on the public bus with his briefcase on one side and an empty seat on the other. The truth was, he liked the guy. The other truth was, he wasn't sure if he wanted to date yet another suit-wearing millionaire. They were moths to his flame, and he had dated one after another over the years. He needed something different, but Brooks was so promising at the same time. "Ooh. Penny for your thoughts?" A familiar voice broke him from his solicitude, and he smiled up at his coworker. "Hey Joe." He patted the seat next to him. "It's nothing." "It sure looks like nothing." The woman sat down next to him, placing her bag over her lap. "How was your weekend?" "It was, well, actually pretty good." "Did you hang out with the hookup guy?" Sidney nodded, slipping his cell phone in the inside pocket of his lightweight blazer. "I did." And he was cool. We met up for drinks, then he came back to my place and spent the night. He made me breakfast the next day, and we spent the day together. I thought hookups were supposed to leave right after the sex. He shrugged. He stayed and he made me breakfast. Any guy who will make me breakfast after a hookup can stay. Joanne laughed. "Okay then. So, are you going to hook up with him again?" "Maybe. I haven't decided yet. I really like him, so I probably shouldn't." "Wait, what? You like him, so you shouldn't hook up with him?" "I mean, he's my type. He's rich and brooding and particular. You know, all the things that get me in trouble every damn time." "Ah. Well, maybe he's different." The bus rolled to a stop and the pair stood up. Sidney followed his coworker off the bus and up to their office. Their conversation shifted from their weekends to their plan for the week. Joanne had snuck in a little work on her portion of the advertising proposal. Sidney hadn't. He spent the morning playing catch-up and compiling new information together after receiving projects from their graphics team and the copy from the writing team. Mid-morning, Dean swung by his and Joanne's cubicle, delivering Sidney's friend an iced coffee and offering Sidney a bottle of water. "How's it going over here?" "Fine, Dean." Joanne smiled, sipping her coffee with delicate fingers and turning monolithed eyes up at the man. Her solemn work expression melted into one of pure adoration. Sidney smirked. "Things are going well. What about you?" "I'm good, but I heard something on the wind." Dean leaned against the inside of Joanne's cubicle. "What?" Sidney cracked the water bottle open and tipped it up to his lips. "I heard the boss sold the company to someone else and is using the money to retire." Joanne tapped her chin. "That seems logical. He is really old, isn't he?" Sidney blinked. "No way. He loves this company. He's been with it for 1,000,000,000,000 years or something." Dean shrugged. "It's just what I heard. Kate doesn't believe it either." "Who did you hear it from, though?" Sidney asked. "I heard it from Craig. You know, his father plays golf with Mr. Murphy or something." Sidney exhaled a heavy breath. "I guess." He turned back to Joanne. "Do you believe it?" "I won't until I see it." Sidney nodded. "Same. I won't believe it until I see it." Dean shrugged again. "Then I guess you better turn around." "What?" Sidney frowned, whipping his chair around to the office entrance. His eyes grew wide. Their boss, Mr. Murphy, walked inside the office in his usual attire, a tailored two-piece suit with the top buttons unfastened. However, he wasn't alone. Once the gray-haired man filed into the room, another man stepped inside after him. This man was familiar, and Sidney's heart dropped to the floor. His eyes were saucers. It was Brooks, the sexy stranger from the weekend. The deal he spoke about was for this company. Brooks, the guy he had considered a relationship with, was now his boss. Brooks's blue eyes scanned over the other employees, before reluctantly turning to Sidney. He schooled his expression, but the surprise was clear in his stony features all the same. The man's full lips parted, and his jaw ticked when he sealed them closed again. The apples of his cheeks colored, and he looked away from Sidney, clearing his throat and looking at Mr. Murphy. Sidney kept his gaze on Brooks as the man turned away from him. He stared at the side of Brooks's head, eyes drinking in his sharp jawline, the dark stubble coating his chin and his prominent, strong features. A thick neck supported his head and swelled into broad shoulders. Today's suit was lightly patterned. It was one Sidney had suggested on a whim, but it looked exceptional on the other man. It gave him a sense of fashion along with his sense of authority, and it hugged his muscles. It pinched in at his tiny waist, showing off the swell of his ass. "You're drooling," Dean lowered beside Sidney, slapping his shoulder. "Is that?" Joanne started. "Why, yeah," Sidney croaked, combing his dreadlocks away from his face as Brooks ventured farther into the room. Mr. Murphy spoke, but Sidney's brain didn't process any of it. Instead, he stared at Brooks, silently begging for his attention while embarrassed about his needs. What he needed was this gorgeous man to walk out of his life. Completely. And yet, this very same man had seen him turned over the back of a couch, begging for an orgasm, and had made breakfast for him the next morning too. After his short speech, Mr. Murphy rested a hand on Brooks' shoulder, urging him forward. "Now, without further ado, please meet the new owner of this firm, Mr. Warren Brooks." Sidney blinked. "Warren Brooks. Oh my goodness, I knew it," Joanne whispered. "Knew what?" Dean flicked his eyes from the new boss to Joanne. "I thought he looked familiar on the app the other night, but I wasn't so sure." "Okay, hun, what did you know though?" Sidney prompted. "Warren Brooks is a multi-billionaire, and he owns real estate all over the country. He was named one of the top 30 under 30 a few years ago, and was on the top 40 under 40 last year. Plus, he's charted as one of the sexiest men alive too. So he's famous?" "Relatively. I'm surprised you didn't recognize him," Sid. "Why would I? I don't sit around stalking famous people." "I don't stalk him, but he's around. He has a lot to say about success when you're young. He started his first business when he was in high school, and he dropped out of university because he developed some productivity app that ended up selling for $1 million. According to his biography, he invested all that money, made another app, did it again." "Yeah, but you said billion," Sidney whispered. "I know I said billion. He also owns real estate, I think. I don't know. His whole theory is about diversifying income, so he has 10 different streams of income he's been developing for over 10 years now. He's a jackass," Dean grunted. Mr. Murphy talked a few minutes more before waving goodbye to everyone and slapping Warren on the back. As the older man left, the billionaire adjusted his blazer and tie, scanning the room again. His gaze lingered on Sidney, until Sidney tore his eyes away and scrubbed flaming cheeks. "Good morning, everyone. As Mr. Murphy said, my name is Warren Brooks, and I am the new owner of this company. I know this transition may be shocking for a lot of you, but I want to ease the transition as best I can." He paused and dug into a briefcase, pulling out a typed piece of paper and tacking it on the bulletin board. "First, I have a set of office rules that will make this transition easier on everyone involved. These can be reviewed on your own time. Second, I understand that Mr. Warren looked at Sidney. He paused again. Powell. Sidney Powell, Sidney stammered, hopping out of his seat and bracing himself against his desk with shaking hands. Mr. Powell, I understand that you are the creative director of our largest project right now. Yeah. I'd like to meet with you in my office this afternoon. Please have all materials for this project presentation ready. Ah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Okay. A shiver trickled down Sidney's spine, and he slumped back in his seat. Warren's lips curled, and his jaw tightened. It was the littlest of changes, but Sidney noticed. They were thinking about the same thing, about Sidney on his knees whispering much naughtier yes sirs. I will spend this week meeting with each creative director, and we will move forward with the future of this company starting next week. You all have the potential and skill set to grow, and I have the knowledge to help. There was a strength in Warren's words that calmed Sidney's galloping heart, and he rolled his chair under his desk, peering at his computer screen. The screen was blank, but he couldn't stare at his sexy boss any longer. Sidney drummed his fingers on his desk, played one round of a virtual card game, and then finally pulled up the text document of his brief. His brain fought with him. One side of it was too frantic to focus, worried about the upcoming meeting. The other side was brimming with excitement for all the wrong reasons. Sidney wanted to meet Warren in his office, but talking about the project wasn't what sort of talking Sidney had in mind. Sidney propped his chin in his hand as he idly worked on the project, reviewing the sample ads and sending several back for redesigns, as well as scrutinizing the ad copy. He gave up at noon and closed his eyes, covering his face with his hands. Have you looked at the rules yet? A shrill tone asked. What? He cracked one eye open, and his gaze landed on the oldest person in the office. Kate. A pantsuit hugged her post-baby curves, and her stringy blonde hair framed her severe features. No, I haven't. Well, you ought to. They're extreme. I'm sure they're reasonable rules. With a scowl, Kate rushed over to the bulletin board and removed the list, tacking it inside Sidney's cubicle. Look. Okay, what am I looking for, exactly? Just read it. Kate tapped her fingers against the paper. Sidney scanned his eyes over the rules. These seem reasonable. Reasonable. The break room has to be cleared out every evening. Okay? It should be cleaned out anyway because y'all gross. Fine. What about the rule about personal items on your desk? Your sloth water bottle and purple mousepad are going to have to go. Sidney rolled his eyes. And there's a regulation on internet usage too. See. If he catches us on social media not related to work, then there are consequences. Oh yeah, that makes sense, since our jobs aren't on the internet or anything. Sidney rolled his eyes. Joanne popped up from behind his cubicle divider and scanned her dark eyes over the list. And it says you can't have any inter-office romance. Where? Sidney blinked. It's the very last rule, Sid. Oh. Right. Huh. Well, I'm good with that. I don't see a problem. What about me and Dean? Are we supposed to break up now because our boss doesn't allow office romance? Hide it. Joanne frowned. I don't think my boss should be in my personal life. Sounds personal. You should do something. Kate crossed her arms over her chest. Me? Sidney's eyes widened. You did sleep with him, you know, Joanne added. Shush. I don't want the entire planet knowing what my weekends look like. Wait. You slept with him? He's gay? Kate uncrossed her arms and gripped the top of the cubicle, leaning inside Sidney's space. Sidney leaned back. Okay. First, fine, yes, I slept with him. Second, I don't actually know if he's gay. He could be bisexual or pansexual or whatever, I don't know. Hell, he could have just been experimenting. That's his own business. Not mine. But you said it was good though, right? Joanne lifted her eyebrows. Kate cut her eyes to Warren's office, puckering her lips. When she turned around again, she snapped her fingers. I have an idea. Oh God, Sidney groaned. Just listen, Kate sighed, seduce him. Sidney stared. What the actual fuck, Kate? What? It's a brilliant idea. It's a stupid idea. What am I going to do, bend over his desk and stick my ass up? If that's what you call seduction, sure. Kate shrugged. Joanne snorted. Perhaps be a little more subtle. You know what he likes, right? We slept together one night. Just one. I don't know the full ins and outs of his sexuality or his preferences. I also don't know the point of this. The point is, if he falls for you, then he has to break his no-office relationships rule, and he'll probably relax all the other rules too because he won't be so uptight, Kate said. Sidney peered towards the man's office and closed his eyes, dropping his head back on his shoulders. This is the stupidest idea, he groaned. Okay, maybe it is. But try it. Kate snatched the list of rules. You know what? Fine. Fine. I'll try your ridiculous scheme, Sidney poked his tongue out at Kate. Anything else you need me to literally stick my ass on the line for? No. I think that's it. With a closed-lipped smile, she turned away and strolled back to her desk. Chapter 6. Warren had barricaded himself in his office behind a stack of unsorted paperwork after he addressed his new employees. He spent most of his morning cleaning the office, manually filing away paperwork, and thinking about Sidney. His mind had created years of possibilities for them, and his own office rules had taken them all away. He wasn't backing out of his office rules. Employee dating never ended well, especially when one person worked over the other one. He didn't suspect he would treat Sidney any differently, but the man was a stranger too. They had only spent one amazing night together. It wasn't a relationship. Warren left the office for lunch, sitting alone at a sushi place and scrolling through emails on his cell phone, and he returned an hour later, posting himself in his office again. Mid-afternoon, he called Sidney to his office. The man knocked and then poked his head inside. Hey there, Sidney greeted him, tacking on a light, nervous laugh after his words. Warren leaned back in his seat, nodding towards the chair in front of him and lacing his hands behind his head. Please sit. Yeah, sure. He rested a fat folder on Warren's desk. It's crazy the company you were talking about the other night was this one. Ironic, Warren murmured, sliding the folder across the table and opening it. The contents started with a brief. They were preparing advertisements for a new, gender-neutral fragrance company. The brief listed the expectations, the budget, and the pitch. Warren read it. His neutral expression deepened to a frown as he scanned his eyes over the page. By the time he finished reading the pitch, his features had scrunched into a scowl. So, what do you think? Sidney eyed him. It's not good. The writing is rushed, the language is juvenile, and the grammar is bad. This is unacceptable work. What? I worked on it. Sidney snatched the paper out of Warren's hands and looked over it. It's bad. You have to redo it, and I want a new version on my desk tomorrow morning. I can't aid you in this project if you haven't fully decided on the direction. I have a direction. I've been talking to the design team and copywriters and everything, Sidney protested, jamming the page back in his folder. Are you going to look at everything else? His pleading brown eyes met Warren's. No. Why not? Because I'm your boss, and I don't have to look at everything else. You aren't just pitching to your client, you're pitching to me as well. If this is the kind of work you put out, you may not be suitable to continue with this company. You're going to fire me. I have expectations for my employees, and right now you are not meeting them. Brooks? Fix it. Our meeting is over. Sidney picked up the folder again, easing out of the chair and lingering beside it, bracing himself against it with one hand clutching the folder. The other combed through his thick dreadlocks. Sidney looked as good in a suit as he did in sweats and a shirt. Perhaps better because Warren knew every lean muscle hidden under the fabric. He remembered the planes of Sidney's body, the sharp points of his shoulder blades, the diamond of curls in the center of his chest, and his thick cock between his thighs. Warren wet his lips. Do you need anything else? Yeah, actually, I do. I wanted to go over your rules. Yeah. They're kind of strict, particularly the one about dating within the office. I think it's a good rule. Yeah, well, I think it's kind of dumb to regulate your employees' dating life. I mean, we see these people 9 hours a day. It's normal to get to know them and be interested in them. I see. Besides, what about us, sir? Sidney met his eyes, parting his full lips. Warren's jaw clenched. A ripple of desire went through him. What about us? I thought we could try something together. Did you? Yeah, like dating or something. I mean, it seemed like you had fun this weekend since you spent the night and we had 2 meals together. I did. So, I thought we could do something together. Do something? Yeah, like dating. No. All right then. Good talk. Sidney tipped his head and strolled out of Warren's office, slamming the door behind him. Nope. Sidney dropped the fat manila folder on his desk and looked at Joanne. I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I'm done. So, I'm guessing your meeting didn't go over so well. No. He's a rich, arrogant, holier-than-thou asshole. Sidney groaned. I'm going to be here all night rewriting this brief, and he's set on not dating people he works with. Set. Honey, you're out of luck. But you barely tried. Joanne pouted. I talked to Dean. About the dating rule. Joanne nodded. He thinks we should break up, because he doesn't want to be fired. Sidney slumped down in his seat and swiveled his chair around, rubbing his hands down his face. You guys have been dating for almost a year now. I know. We were thinking of moving in together, too. Joanne chewed her bottom lip. But it's okay, it's wrong to ask you to seduce the boss. He slumped forward in his seat, crossing his arms over his desk and staring at the computer monitor. It is, he murmured. Thanks for trying, anyway. Is there any way I can help you with your brief? No, Joe. You already do plenty for me. I can work this out on my own. If you email it to me tonight, I can check it for spelling errors first thing in the morning. Joe, really, you don't have to help me. This is my part, and you're already helping me so much with this project. She bit her bottom lip. I know, but I want to. You're my best friend, so I want us both to do well. Yeah. Sidney lifted his head, propping his chin in his hands as he watched his colleague's head bob up and down over the privacy divider. She entered his cubicle, after she shouldered a messenger bag. You getting out of here? Joanne nodded. Yeah. She squeezed Sidney's shoulder. Let me know if I can do anything to help, okay? I'll have my phone on me all night. All right. Joanne left the building, and the rest of Sidney's coworkers trickled out as the evening continued. Eventually, the only 2 people left were him and Warren. The light from Warren's office spilled into the shallow hallway and illuminated his shadow in the windows. Gritting his teeth, Sidney turned back to his computer and focused on the brief. He had completely scrapped the old one, starting from scratch with a new approach as he replayed Warren's complaints in his brain. He started with an outline, dividing up what they had already completed for the project and expanding on each item. He detailed the current visual and digital ad projects. Once he had compiled the concrete information, he sat back in his seat, drumming his fingers and peering towards Warren's office. His light was still on. Sidney chewed his bottom lip before sending the man a sample of his current brief and getting up from his desk, approaching Warren's door. He knocked. Come in, Warren grunted. He cracked the door open, poking his head inside the room. Hey, I was wondering if there was a certain way you wanted the brief, like a sample layout or something. Warren looked up from his work, focusing his bright blue eyes on Sidney. I thought you had gone home. No. You said I needed to redo my brief, so I've been working on it. Ah. Are we the last 2 in the office for the night? Yeah, pretty much. Everyone went home, even the graphic designers, and they're always hanging around here late at night, drinking soft drinks and playing silly computer games. Warren exhaled a half chuckle. Is that so? Yeah. Sidney rubbed the back of his neck. Nerves tickled his belly. So, Do you have a sample outline? You don't. Sidney shook his head. Nah. I mean, I kind of know all the parts that need to be in the pitch. I mean, no, I really know them. I just don't know how to get it all on paper. Your current advertisement. It's for gender-neutral body perfume, yes? Warren's tongue stumbled over the word perfume, and a little smile tugged at the corners of Sidney's lips. Yeah. Who is your target audience? I've done some research on comparable brands and they're targeting a younger crowd, but they also have a lower price point. I think with the given price point for this brand, they need to market a little older. Fresh young professionals, essentially. What else? I don't know. Sidney frowned. The weight of Warren's gaze sagged his shoulders. The previous boss had cared about the company and its employees, but he had grown lazy and had settled into a set of routine clients. They always had work, but they were never growing. Warren wanted growth. You don't know. Go get your laptop. I am going to walk you through the parts of a brief. Then you will have a template, and this will be easier for you in the future. Oh? Why yeah, okay. Sidney dashed out of the room and grabbed his laptop before returning to Warren's office, sitting across from him and placing the laptop on the desk. I believe you have all the information for this in your brain, but I agree you have problems translating it to paper. Warren adjusted his blazer and eased out of his seat, strolling around his desk and leaning over Sidney's shoulder. In a patient voice, he walked Sidney through the brief outline. Sidney shivered, wetting his lips as he tapped the keys. Warren's warm breath against his skin and sultry voice in his ears drew his mind away from the brief and to thoughts of their past weekend. Warren, in so many words, said it would never happen again, and Sidney had been okay with that. He thought he had been okay with that, but the realization of it sat in as Warren spoke over his shoulder. The truth was, he wasn't okay with it. He wanted Warren on top of him again. Sidney finished the brief outline and moved away from the other man, exhaling a shaky breath as he rubbed his hands down his thighs. Thanks, he whispered. Of course. I will give you until midday tomorrow to finish this. Now since you have an outline, it shouldn't take you very long. Yeah, no. The outline will make it easier. Yeah? Sidney studied his computer screen as Warren moved back around his desk. I will be here a little while longer. If you would like to work in here with me, you can. Wouldn't we call that favoritism, boss? Sidney smirked. If you are the only other person here, does it matter if it's favoritism or not? It matters to me. Ah. Warren's perpetually frowning lips lifted to a smile, mirroring Sidney. Well, if you do not want to be favored, then I suppose you can go back to your desk. Oh no. I'm cool being favored. It's just, you mind if I get comfortable? Comfortable how? Sidney pulled his tie loose and slipped it over his head, draping it across his lap, and he thumbed the top buttons of his shirt open as well, exposing the start of his chest. Warren stared at him. The man's blue eyes followed his movements with a sharp gaze, and a soft rumble emanated from him. Are you comfortable now? Not quite. Sidney grinned, letting his hair fall over his shoulders and combing it around his face. He untucked his shirt, peeling the wrinkled flaps from inside his slacks and showing a sliver of hidden skin. The boss's nostrils flared, and his pink lips pressed into a thin line. Almost, Sidney continued, unbuckling his belt last. Almost. Yeah. I'm comfortable now, I think. Sidney leaned back, hooking his arms around the chair and stretching his chest. Warren lifted his eyebrows before looking down at a stack of IRS reports. I need to finish this. I'm not stopping you from finishing that, Sidney replied. I'm working on my brief anyway. He tipped his head to his laptop. Perhaps I should order us something to eat. Are you hungry? I could eat. Good. If you would excuse me then. Warren scrambled from his desk a second time, breezing past Sidney and exiting his office. Sidney spied a slight bulge in his slacks, and his light smile spread to a full grin. Okay. I want Chinese food, Sidney called after him. Sure, Warren grunted, closing the office door behind him and leaving Sidney alone in the room. 30 minutes later, the man returned with a handful of food, and the savory smell of fried rice and marinated chicken filled the room. I purchased water to drink. Warren placed the bag of food on his desk. You didn't ask me what I wanted. What would you like? I want orange chicken. That's what I got you. Warren placed a container in front of Sidney with a pair of chopsticks and a bottled water. How did you know? Lucky guess. Sidney eyed the man for a few slow minutes before grabbing the bag of food and digging through it. You bought one of everything. Yes? You didn't have to guess. Sidney shoved the food away and laughed. You can have the rest for leftovers. Whoa. I don't need the food. I have food at my place. I can cook. I'm sure, but I purchased it for you, so you can have it. Yeah. Sidney frowned. If you don't want it, toss it, Warren grunted as he took his seat again, pressing his tie into his body as he eased down. It doesn't matter. No, it's fine. My mom will like it. But you won't. I mean, it's fine. Thanks. Thanks, but you probably shouldn't be buying me food since we're not supposed to be friends. Ah. Office rules. Yep. But I'll take the free food. Sidney winked, recovering his playful nature. He discarded his computer and propped his elbows on Warren's desk, popping one of the containers open and splitting his chopsticks apart. He picked up a piece of marinated chicken and put it to his lips. Warren watched him. His piercing blue eyes fixed on Sidney's casual movements, only traveling to his face after the bite had disappeared past his lips. Is it good? Yeah. Sidney chewed, grinning. Thank you. You're welcome. Warren returned to his IRS paperwork. So your rules are kinda strict. Joanne and Dean are together. Yeah. They've been together for a while, and it seems like it makes sense that people from the office would date. You see them every single day, so you get close, you know? If their relationship ends, then the work environment will be uncomfortable. Warren ripped through a stack of papers and dumped them into a metal bin next to a small trash bin. You think so? They're both adults. You don't think they can get over it to work together? I don't want to have to worry about them getting over it to work together. Ah. Did it happen to you? The rich man started on a new stack of paperwork, squinting at the headers and dividing them into 3 individual stacks. Did what happen to me? Did you date someone at the office and it end badly? I don't think going through our dating history is appropriate for our office relationship. Okay, but what about our personal relationship? We don't have one. Sidney ate another bite of chicken, rolling it over his tongue. Okay, well, for conversation. I told you about my dating history, remember? So it can be 1 for 1. Warren flicked his eyes up over his paperwork. His prominent brow bone shaded his bright eyes, and annoyance shined in them. Yes. It happened once. How? With a senior employee and myself. Were you the senior employee? No. So, Sidney sat his chopsticks down, you got taken advantage of. Is that what you're saying? Warren looked back down. You can tell me, you know. I won't judge you or anything. You should eat and work on your brief. I will as soon as you tell me what happened. No. Okay, then I'll guess. What I think someone took advantage of you, and you felt trapped, and you don't want someone else to be in the same position. Are you finished now? Warren looked up again, features solemn and void of emotion. Sidney sighed. Yeah. I'm finished. He closed the food container and tucked it back in the plastic bag with the others before turning to his laptop. Good. Let me know if you need any further help with your brief. Sure, Sidney muttered. Chapter 7. Warren filled the rest of the week with initial evaluations, sitting down with each employee and reviewing their current projects. While everyone had been enthusiastic about their projects, no one was up to the standard he wanted them to be at. The positive part was he was confident they could get there. The unfortunate part was that they weren't there currently, and he had been hard on them the entire week. He was grateful for Friday, and he spent the entire weekend thinking about Sidney, scrolling through the pictures from the hookup app, and wishing things were different. Monday, he received a call from a potential client and scheduled a meeting with them for the afternoon. He did preliminary research on the company, browsing through their available products and getting a feel for their business. After taking a page full of notes, he considered his employees, looking through their initial evaluations. He had 2 creative directors with 2 different sets of skills. Kate, the oldest woman in the office, had years of experience and a strong understanding of traditional advertising, such as newspaper ads and television ads. The other creative director was Sidney. Sidney, though younger, had a different type of experience. He had been a photographer before graduating to creative director. He understood digital media in a way Kate didn't. He also was the one Warren would rather spend time with if he was picking one or the other. The new client's office was on the other side of the city, nestled in the wealthier part of town. They were also a young company, mostly dependent on social media for growth. Sidney had the skills, and he was personable, charming, everything Warren liked in a creative director. And a partner. Warren grabbed his jacket, adjusting it on his shoulders and glimpsing himself in his computer screen, before exiting his office and approaching Sidney's cubicle, knocking against the flimsy wall. "What, sir?" Sidney glanced at him from the reflective computer screen before spinning around in his seat and turning sweet brown eyes up at him. They sparkled with mischief. "I need you to come with me to meet a new client." "I'm kinda busy here, sir." Sidney tipped his head to the side, exposing the length of his mahogany neck. His smooth, unblemished skin taunted Warren as much as his broad smile. "So you are. But I guess I can fit you into my schedule. When do we need to be there?" "In an hour and a half. I will email you the information I have gathered so far on the company, and we can leave in 30 minutes. "Cool. Where is it? I may need to go ahead and get going." "It doesn't take an hour and a half to drive across town." "You're right, but I'm not driving. I'm taking public transit, so it might take an hour and a half, I don't know. But it's okay, I can look at your email on my cell phone." "Public transit? You have no vehicle." Nah. It's a city, I don't need one." Sidney closed his computer and stuffed it in his messenger bag. "It's fine. I'll meet you over there." Sidney moved past Warren, facing him as he sidestepped out of his cubicle and giving Warren a full nose of his woodsy coconut cologne. It made Warren's head spin. "I can take you." "You can ride with me," Warren blurted out. "Nah, it's okay, boss. I don't mind taking the bus." Sidney peered at him over his shoulder, winking before he disappeared in the stairwell. Warren grit his teeth, grinding them against each other once Sidney disappeared. He dashed into his office and grabbed his own belongings, sending his notes to the other man, and then raced down the stairs. He met Sidney at the door. "I'll take you." "Are you sure? I'm really fine with public transit." "Like really? My vehicle is this way." Sidney rolled his head over his shoulders, groaned, and moved after Warren, following him to the covered parking garage. "You really don't have to do this." "I want to, and we can discuss my notes along the way." "Slick. Make a work excuse why we have to ride together." "I can dig it." Warren unlocked his black luxury sedan with a keyless entry remote, and Sidney froze. "This is your car?" "Yes." He made a noise, staring at it, and then turning away. "Nope. I'm taking the bus. Thanks for the offer, though." Warren blinked. "What?" He moved after Sidney, grabbing his bicep in a firm grip. "What's wrong?" "I don't want a ride from you." "It's pretty simple, I thought." "Yes. I am clear on that part. However, my question is why you don't want a ride. Because I hate overpriced sports cars and I hate the men who drive them. You knew I drove one the other night. I suspected you drove one the other night. I didn't actually know for sure. Warren peered at his vehicle and then trailed his eyes back to Sidney. And what's wrong with my vehicle? I can afford it, so it is what I choose to drive. And there's the problem, cutie. This is one of those show-off types of vehicles with bad gas mileage and even worse quality. In other words, the vehicle is a piece of shit. And cars say something about the drivers. What does my car say about me? Your car says you have the potential to be a terrible boyfriend. My car or your baggage? Sidney flicked his eyes to the vehicle and then flicked his eyes back to Warren. Both. He lifted his chin. You have a problem with my money? No. I have a problem with your entitlement surrounding your money. Ah. This is about your ex. You told me about this. I did. You spent the weekend with me. Just Saturday, and Saturday was great, but I hadn't decided if I was really going to continue talking to you. I also didn't expect to see you again. Ah. Serendipity is on my side then. No, she's not, because you have a rule against dating your coworkers. So she's on no one's side. Sidney widened the distance between them. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to catch the bus. He spun on his heels and strolled towards the parking garage exit. My car is well-cooled and private, Warren offered. And now you sound like a creepy guy with candy hidden in his backseat. Sidney waved a hand. Later. I'll meet you at the location. Text me the address. Sure, Warren muttered, crossing his arms over his chest as the man left. He sucked his teeth and dipped into his vehicle, smoothing his hands over the leather steering wheel. He dropped his keys in the drink holder and pressed the start button while holding down the brake pedal. The car purred to life, and he reversed out of his parking space and exited the parking garage, looping around the building. He cruised past the empty bus stop and cruised past a man running down the sidewalk with a briefcase clutched to his chest and dreadlocks swinging behind him. Sidney. Warren whipped across the lanes and veered into a parallel parking space, descending his passenger window and leaning across the console as Sidney's heavy footfalls grew closer. He tapped his horn and Sidney slowed to a stop, chest heaving. A sheen of sweat across his forehead sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. What do you want now? I can give you a ride. No, I'm really going to catch the bus, and if you keep talking to me, I'll miss it. Again. Sid. Don't call me that. Sidney. Warren pinched his forehead. Please allow me to give you a ride. I said no. And I said please. As they bickered, the next bus rolled past Warren and sighed at the next bus stop 5 blocks away. Just because you said, oh fucking hell. Sidney groaned and darted after the bus, waving one hand in the air. The flaps of his blazer billowed behind him. The bus stalled for 2 minutes with the front doors swung open, but closed them again and sped away, leaving Sidney panting on the sidewalk. Warren rolled up to him again. I can still give you a ride. No. 100 times no. Just drive away in your dumb fancy car with your dumb fancy suit. Please, Sidney spat. And let them know I'm running a little late, because I missed the bus twice talking to you. Warren sighed, rubbing his hands over his face before taking off again. He drove across the city in 20 minutes and found himself pacing the client's lobby for 45 minutes as he waited for Sidney. He checked his watch every 10 minutes and his cell phone every 5 minutes, until the other man burst through the doors with a scowl on his features and flushed cheeks. He hid the amusement from his eyes as they landed on Sidney. You made it in time. Yeah, because I had to run most of the way, he snarled. 1 second. He dipped into the bathroom and returned looking dry and smelling pleasant. Okay, I looked over the email you sent me and I think your idea is okay, except Facelook is basically dead and not worth marketing to the younger crowd. The only people still using it are old people and whores. Really? Warren blinked. Yeah. Wait, do you have a Facelook? No. Okay, yeah, see, you proved my point. Anyway, this is a sex toy company, so you have to market it a certain way. So, you do not like my ideas? Warren lifted his eyebrows. I mean, Sidney shrugged his shoulders up. It's a sex toy company. You have to market it a certain way, but you nailed the demographic. I definitely think the goal here is to get younger people on board with this, and with the diverse options and colors, queer and non-binary people can get on board too. Speaking of marketing, have you considered rebranding the firm? Rebranding my firm? Yeah. I haven't, however. I am open to it if you have a proposal. I do, actually. I've been thinking about it. I can tell you about it later. All right, but back to the client. What do you want to change about the tentative plan? Okay, well, for the younger crowd, people like influencers more than they like commercials, considering all the streaming devices that allow you to pay money to avoid commercials. Traditional commercials and ads aren't the way to go. The way to go is to get influencers with responsive followers promoting the product. Influencers. Yeah. Like people with huge followings on YouTube and Fastgram. PicChat is okay, but it's also kind of mostly for kids. Noted. So basically, I'm saying we should plan our strategy around getting influencers to use and promote the product. Then we can do a few select still ads for Fastgram and Facelook. They won't do amazing, but 7 times, right? Warren knit his eyebrows and then nodded. All right. Change the proposal for me and pitch it to the client. What? Really? Sidney's tired features broke into a smile. Yeah. It sounds solid. I like it. Update the tentative budget as well. Okay, cool. With a beaming smile on his face, Sidney led Warren into the meeting room. Warren closed the door behind them and sat down across from the clients. They introduced themselves, and then Warren nodded to Sidney, who presented his idea. By the time the meeting was over, Sidney had relaxed the clients with his confident and relatable nature. Warren smiled as he watched Sidney in his element. Despite needing help with the written part of his briefs, he knew his business. He knew social media. He knew marketing and advertising because he was doing it right before Warren's eyes. Despite having fought in the parking lot, rode a sticky bus, and ran several blocks, Sidney was fresh-faced and beaming with presence. The clients loved him. Warren loved him. When the meeting concluded, everyone exchanged parting words and hugs. The clients left the room with a sense of confidence, and Warren exited the room with a sense of awe. You were amazing, he touched Sidney's shoulders, squeezing them. Hey. Thanks, but I wasn't. I could have done better. What do you mean? I mean, part of my job is to put them at ease with our services, right? I didn't feel like they were completely at ease. They were. You have a gift with people. This is why everyone in the office adores you. They weren't completely at ease. I'll send them a follow-up email a little later. It should help. And not everyone in the office likes me. Kate. Kate doesn't like me. Warren laughed. You know, during their evaluations, I asked everyone who their favorite employee was. I had considered doing an Employee of the Week thing. You. Don't, Sidney groaned. It's too, I don't know, corporate. We're a small company, we're always Employee of the Week. Do you want to know what they said? Oh yeah. Sure. They said Joanne was the hardest worker, but you were their favorite because of your upbeat personality. Ah. My upbeat personality. I like it. All right, so I'll see you back at the office, and I'll work up a proposal for our firm. I can. Nope. Let me finish. I'm still going to say no. Well, at least let me finish before you say no. Fine? We can discuss the firm over dinner. Sidney narrowed his eyes to slits and stared at Warren. His stomach rumbled. Fine. Mostly because I'm hungry. I'll take it, I suppose. Warren smiled. No, don't smile like you got your way. You haven't. Sidney ducked past him, stalking towards the exit. All right. I haven't. And where would you like to eat? Warren followed, still smiling. The Italian place a few blocks from here. All right. Chapter 8. I thought you were doing something about him, Kate grumbled after stalking up to Sidney's cubicle, dropping a piece of paper over his keyboard. I'm working on it. Why? Look. She pointed a manicured finger. Look at this evaluation. I got an okay. I've never been just okay. Sidney picked up the evaluation form and scanned over it. You probably shouldn't be showing this to me. Why not? Because it's your private evaluation. Besides, he still gave you a raise anyway, so what's the problem? The problem is I'm okay. I think you're taking it too far. He wants you to improve, that's all. So, he figures if he gives you a hard evaluation, it'll make you work harder. I don't work that way. Okay, well, that's his method. Sidney shrugged his shoulders. I mean, we all know you're awesome at your job, and you've been doing this for years. He's just pointing out spots where you can improve. It's no big deal. Sidney handed Kate her evaluation back. If he wants me to improve, he can go about it in a different way. I don't like having a bad evaluation. Sidney sighed. You still got a raise. Just calm down, read his suggestions, and try to implement them. That's all he wants. Kate pressed her lips together, hollowing her horsey cheeks. What did your evaluation say? It said acceptable. You got a better evaluation than me. Barely, but in my defense, he's railed on me more times than you two. Remember, I had to spend all night fixing a brief the first week he got here. Kate huffed. True. Fine. Listen. We all have ways we can improve, and I know his methods are kind of harsh, but he means well. He just wants you to be better. Fine. She folded her evaluation and tucked it into the pocket of her blazer. First the rules, then the evaluations. I thought you were working on him. I am working on him, but good seduction isn't overnight. Craig strolled over to Sidney's cubicle, holding a white piece of paper in his pudgy hands. Hey Sid, he muttered. Hey Craig. What's up? Not much, man. I just got my evaluation. It's not good at all. He hunched his shoulders. It's just an evaluation. Let me see it. Sidney stretched his hand out, and Craig reluctantly handed him the paper. Kate flicked her eyes between them. Sidney read the page, shrugging until he reached the end. Then his eyes widened. Woo. It says if you don't have marked improvement in 2 weeks, further actions will be taken. Yeah, I know. It sounds like he's going to fire me or something. No, dude. No. He's not going to fire you. You're the best designer we have here. Well, he clearly doesn't think that way. See? I can't imagine what Dean's evaluation says. It was probably just a pink slip, Kate said. Good Lord, Kate. He's not firing anyone. Are you sure, though? How well do you know him? Craig's blonde eyebrows bunched together in the center of his forehead. I know him well enough to know he's not firing anyone. Has he outright said he won't, though? Damn it. I'll talk to him. Sidney closed his laptop and glanced between Kate and Craig. I will talk to him, okay? Thanks, man. Craig sighed. Sidney tucked his laptop under his arm and wandered to Warren's office, knocking on the door before poking his head inside. Hey, boss. Warren looked up from behind his computer, peering at Sidney through a pair of square, thick-rimmed glasses. Can I help you? Sidney's heart melted, and he nibbled his bottom lip, slipping into the room and closing the door behind him. He set his laptop on the man's desk. Yeah, actually. I wanted to talk about the evaluations. Okay. What about them? Well, you know everyone's afraid you might fire them, and they were wondering. You're afraid I will fire you. Me? I mean, you're pretty harsh. Are you going to fire anyone? If they don't perform up to standards, then they could be terminated. Warren looked back at his computer screen, and his fingers tapped on the keys. Yeah. I understand that, but everyone's been here for a really long time. Especially Kate, and we just like more peace of mind, because we love the company. Warren inhaled a breath and sat back on his seat. They sent you in here to see if I'm going to fire anyone? Yeah, pretty much. If they don't perform up to standards, then they could be terminated. Yeah, I can't tell them that. Give me a different answer. Tell them to improve. But Kate's excellent. Why do you want her to improve? Everyone can make improvements. Okay, well, give me an evaluation form. Sidney stretched out his hand and wiggled his fingers. Why? Because you're the only person that hasn't been evaluated on performance. So I'm going to hit you up with an evaluation right now. Warren lifted his eyebrows. Excuse me? What? Are you afraid of honest feedback? Sidney smirked. I love this company, and I'm doing this because I want to make sure you know what areas you can improve in. Sidney's boss narrowed his piercing blue eyes and opened his drawer, fishing out an evaluation form and laying it on his desk. He placed a pen on top of it and looked at Sidney. Thank you. Grinning, Sidney perched himself on the edge of Warren's desk and scribbled on the evaluation form, answering each assessment question thoroughly and placing a final evaluation at the top. Needs improvement. Then he handed the evaluation form to Warren. Here. Sidney stood up and grabbed his laptop. I'll see ya. Where are you going? Back to my desk. I was almost finished with the proposal you wanted for this firm, and about halfway done with what I've been working on for the sex toy company. Let me see what you have for both. No, sir, you need to read and review your evaluation first. Warren leveled his eyes with Sidney. They lacked patience. Mr. Powell. Sit down. A shiver trickled over Sidney's spine, and he flicked his eyes over Warren's head as he wet his lips. His heart fluttered in his chest, and those 4 words took him all the way back to their initial hookup. He hadn't been with anyone since. Not from lack of desire, but he knew after sleeping with Warren, no one else would satisfy him the same way. His body remembered Warren's gentle but confident touch and craved more of it. Yes, sir, Sidney teased, nostrils flaring as he glimpsed into Warren's eyes. He eased down in the seat across from the other man, bracing himself on the desk. His heart pounded, and his breath shallowed as Warren held his gaze. Very good. Show me what you've been working on. Why, yeah. His voice shivered in his throat, and he opened his laptop, fumbling with it, as he kept his eyes glued to Warren. Warren adjusted his glasses on his nose and surveyed the evaluation. His stern features lightened to a smirk as he continued reading. By the time he finished the evaluation, a smile painted his face. You think my evaluation is amusing? Sidney ventured. I do, but well received. You think I am too harsh, I see. Warren folded the piece of paper and tucked it under his keyboard. Thank you. For what? For your honesty. I appreciate it. Well, good. I'm always going to be honest with you. I would hope so. Yup. Sidney drummed his keys. So I shared the documents with you. You should be able to take a look at them. Indeed. Warren's eyes scanned over his screen. Let's look at the plan for this firm first. Sure. I just think since we're an advertising firm, we should be better at advertising and marketing. Our materials are outdated, and we're not really getting new clients like we could be. I think we should also stick to a certain demographic. If we narrow our focus audience, I think we'll be able to price higher and have enough clients for everyone. I see. And you think our demographic should be budding LGBT businesses? I mean, naturally, yeah. It would make you look good. I mean, It would make you look better. Sidney scrubbed flaming cheeks. Warren chuckled. And you think we should advertise where? To be honest, we don't do a lot of advertising right now, and there's nothing hugely wrong with it, except for an advertising company not to advertise. It seems weird. We have experience on our side, so if we had a very targeted ad on Fastgram, we should be okay. Just one? Yeah, most businesses we want to work with are going to be on Fastgram. The budget? It's on there. Sidney shrugged, but really, shouldn't we already have a marketing budget built in? We probably haven't been using our marketing budget over the years. I will look. Yeah. So now on to the sex toy company. Indeed. Sidney cut his eyes around the room. Did you ask them for samples? Why would I ask them for samples? So we can use the product, obviously. We need to know what we're advertising. You should call them and ask for samples. We'll have to send items to the influencers anyway. Warren pressed his lips together. You want me to call and request samples of intimate toys? Hell yeah. Sidney laughed, hopping out of his seat and strolling around Warren's desk. Pull up the website so I know what toys I want. I don't want them to send a bunch of rabbit vibrators. Warren shook his head but did as he was told. The website loaded, and then Sidney took over, placing his hand over Warren's as he browsed the website. His dreadlocks fell over Warren's shoulder, and he took in the warm scent of his musky cologne. Sidney's mouth watered, and he cleared his throat. I think I want this one at least. He stopped at curved anal plug with a wide base. It's supposed to be able to massage your prostate if you clench around it. Interesting, Warren rumbled, noting the item number and description on a small notepad. And can't forget a cock ring. Oh wait, they have one with a plug too. Fuck. Sidney's cock hardened in his slacks, and he shifted his position, squinting at the screen. Warren jotted the second two items down as well, oblivious to Sidney's excitement. I won't call for only 3 items. Select more. Hey. You could get something for yourself. You are looking at the primarily solo toys. I don't want anything from here. Except what? One thing, but it wouldn't be for me. It would be for my partner, whoever I am playing with. Ha. Sidney's eyelids fluttered. Whoever that is will be a lucky partner. Warren selected a cock-shaped rubber device with a slit on one side and a lock on the other. A cock cage? That's what you want? For my partner to wear, yes. Wear like when? All the time sometimes? When I am inside them. Oh. Oh, okay. Sidney's head spun and blood rushed through his body, pooling between his hips. His skin tingled and he licked his lips. Okay. Like, you're basically pounding the shit out of them and they're in a cock cage. How does it feel? Constricting, I'd imagine. Sidney shivered again, combing his fingers through his dreadlocks and raking them all to one side, exposing his neck and tipping his head. The gesture pulled Warren's attention from the computer screen to Sidney. His full lips parted and his eyes sharpened, filling with the hungry gaze Sidney remembered. Sidney smirked. Did you think about me in one? Maybe. I'm thinking about me in one, he panted. Are you? Warren leaned closer. His hot breath tickled Sidney's collarbone, raising goosebumps on his skin. Another shiver raked through him. Yeah. Elaborate. One sharp word. I'm thinking about wearing a cock cage to work, and you bending me over this desk. You pushing all this stuff aside and covering my mouth so no one can hear me moaning. Sidney gripped the back of Warren's chair. I see. Warren reached across Sidney, grabbing a stack of folders and brushing his arm over the man's strained crotch. Sidney's cock throbbed at the passive teasing touch and his whole body quaked. Ooh. Yeah. Yep. Would you like that? Turning me over this desk. Warren's lips parted. A little sigh escaped them, and then he pressed them closed again, rumbling. Let me pick a few more. Sidney taunted Warren with his own move, stretching across him as he reached for the keyboard. He turned his head, facing Warren straight on and flicking his gaze between the man's swollen lips and his bright blue eyes. Warren's jaw clenched. Sidney narrowed the distance between them and parted his own lips, exhaling a sigh against Warren's skin. The man's full lips curved into a lazy, perpetual frown, with a Cupid's bow dip on the top. The blunt edges of frequently shaved hair darkened his skin. A ring of black encased Warren's watery blue eyes, and stripes spidered from his dilated pupils. Sidney saw himself in Warren's eyes. "Please, sir, let me pick a few more." The words rolled off Sidney's tongue. He caressed the honorific, glimpsing into Warren's eyes when he said it. Warren moved a few slow centimeters closer to Sidney, leaving a sliver of distance between their lips. "No," he growled. "A centimeter closer." Their lips touched. Feather light and accidental. Sidney melted. His knees buckled, and he gripped the arms of Warren's chair. "Fuck. Please." He started. There was a knock at the door. Warren stared at Sidney before moving away from him and answering it. Chapter 9. Ooh, okay. I'm so nervous. Sidney adjusted the tie around his neck, slipping his first finger between the collar of his shirt and his mahogany skin. "Why?" Warren glanced at Sidney before fixing his attention on the road, again. His luxury sedan crawled to a stop at a red light, and he reached across the vehicle and patted Sidney's legs, stroking his thumb over the polyester fibers of his slacks. "Because we've worked so hard on this, and I want it to go well. Like we've spent weeks on it, and then you made me do half of it all over again, and I'm just passionate about this project, so I really want it to go well. I don't see why it wouldn't go well. You're an engaging speaker, and the information is solid. I didn't say my nervousness was reasonable. I'm saying I'm nervous. Plus, it's the first completed project since you took over. It's important. It's, I don't know, special." "Sure. You don't think so?" "I think so, but I believe you're being too hard on yourself. You will be exceptional in there. I promise." Sidney studied Warren's profile, dark eyes scorching Warren's tan skin. "I'll be exceptional." "Yes? I like the sound of that. Speaking of exceptional, I tested out the sex toys we got from the other client." "Did you now?" "I did." "And?" "The plug was exceptional." Warren chuckled. "I bet it was. Do you want to hear about it?" "No, thank you." "You don't want to hear about how I fucked myself with it. Riding it on my bathroom floor with company in the other room." Warren gripped the steering wheel, twisting the fabric in tight fists. He knew what Sidney was doing. Sidney was smart and charming, but he had no tact and barely any seduction skills. Of course, Warren appreciated both, especially when Sidney excited himself in the process. What Warren appreciated more, however, was Sidney's submissive moments, little glimpses of his naturally submissive nature. Warren loved the way Sidney's tongue rolled over honorifics, the way he shivered when he said them too. "I thought you were nervous." "I'm trying to change the subject." "I see." Warren shifted gears as he cruised through the green light and accelerated his speed. "How did you enjoy yourself on the bathroom floor, Sidney?" Warren resigned, keeping his gaze on the road even as he asked. "I took home the cock cage too, and I put it on. Then I suctioned the toy to the floor and sat down on it. Then, you know, the wall, the side of the tub, whatever." "You?" "What?" Sidney batted his eyelashes. "This is an inappropriate conversation." "How is it inappropriate? We have a sex toy client. I'm letting you know how the product worked. You know it's inappropriate, and I know what you're doing." Sidney's eyes widened and he gulped air. "What am I doing?" "You're trying to seduce me, so I will change the office rules." "What?" "I'd never do that." "Never." "No way." He paused. "So, has it been working though?" Warren laughed. "You're very charming, but I am not breaking my rule." Sidney melted against his seat. "But why the hell not?" he groaned, turning his head to the side and peering up at Warren through a shade of dark lashes. "Because the office is no place for romance. What about straight fucking? Can we do that at the office?" "No. No straight fucking either. Are fantasies okay?" "Fantasies? Yeah. Fantasies about who we might fuck, because let's face it, since you know what I'm trying to do here, there's no point in being coy about it anymore." "There's not. But you got one thing wrong. It doesn't have anything to do with my coworkers. I want you for myself." Warren pulled into a parking garage and turned into a space, lifting the parking brake before regarding Sidney. He studied the man's dark features, bright eyes, and perpetually smiling lips. Sidney was playful, Cheshire, but Warren knew two things: Sidney was serious, and Sidney didn't want him to know the truth in his words. "Do you?" Warren rumbled. Sidney nodded. "Yeah. I want to see your place this time, and I want you to direct me and command me and take what you want from me." Warren's mouth went dry at Sidney's confession. His pulse galloped in his veins. He wanted those things too. "I see," Warren whispered, climbing out of his vehicle and pocketing his keys. He grabbed his briefcase from the back seat and stalked towards the entrance. Sidney rushed behind him. "That's all you have? You see?" "Yes. Mr. Powell, we're about to walk into a major presentation. I believe it's time to focus now." Warren cleared his throat, ignoring the distinct sparkle in Sidney's eyes. The man knew he had won. If Warren's tight slacks weren't a tell, his flushed cheeks and dilated eyes were. Warren slid a hand down the front of his body, smoothing over his button-down shirt and his silk tie. "After the presentation, we will celebrate." "Oh yeah? I will take you someplace." "What do some people say? Cloud 9? Maybe 7 minutes in heaven, then." "To dinner." Sidney opened his mouth with a protest on the tip of his tongue, but before he spoke, the client approached them. Sidney's entire demeanor changed. He had been flirty and submissive with Warren, but when he turned on his heels, he squared his shoulders and added an inch to his height. At first, he faked his confidence, but as he laughed with the representative, his natural confidence took over, and he walked down the hall alongside the client, leaving Warren trailing behind them both with a pleasant smile on his face. Through the meeting, he let Sidney have center stage as he went through a brief overhead display of the advertisements, a projected profit margin, and the rest of the detailed brief before allowing questions. The meeting extended through the afternoon as Sidney courted the client, and Warren observed. With each easy laugh from Sidney's lips, Warren fell deeper in love. There was something about Sidney, about the way he worked a room, about the way he made everyone he spoke with feel individual, special, precious. Warren had said it before, but he truly believed it. Sidney had a talent, a unique grace, and a sexiness when it came to his conversations with others, especially their clients. He lost himself in Sidney's melodic voice and his easy chatter, drowning in his warm brown eyes. 3 hours passed before Sidney ended the conference, hugging the client around the shoulders and handing him a copy of all the information discussed. The client walked Sidney and Warren to the exit, and the pair launched into a casual discussion of local eateries at Sidney's urging. The client gave them several suggestions and patted Warren on the shoulder, nodding his head. "I'll be in touch," he promised. "Of course." Warren lifted the corners of his lips into a smile, nodding his head. "It was good talking to you today. Thank you for allowing us to work on this project for you." "Oh no. Thank you for having such a direction. Truthfully, I had no idea where to go with advertising, but Mr. Powell here is an advertising genius. He's uncovered every possible stone. He's good in that way." Warren smiled. "He's a true asset to my company." Sidney beamed and administered final goodbyes before strolling out of the building. The gravel crunched under his shoes as he walked back to the vehicle in silence, recharging his battery in the short reprieve. Then he turned to Warren. "What do you think?" "It went well." "Just well?" "Sidney, you're an amazing speaker, and you set these clients at ease in a way I cannot do. I meant what I said. You are truly an asset to this company. Thanks. So, we should go to one of the restaurants our client suggested. Yes? Warren agreed as he unlocked his vehicle and climbed inside. So, tell me about yourself. Besides owning a business and having some bad experiences in relationships, what would you like to know? I'd like to know the boring things, like, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? What's your favorite food? I work for fun. Work is my hobby. I don't. Can you pick a non-work related hobby? No. Work is my hobby. I love it. I love building businesses and seeing the workers grow under new management. I've enjoyed watching your growth too. You've always had the potential inside of you, but you would not have pushed yourself had I not been harsh with you. I'll give you that point. Do you do anything else for fun besides work? I read. You told me this. Do you read fiction books? Books on business and marketing? Sidney blinked and then laughed. Books on work. There's gotta be more to you than just work and hot sex though. Can I ask you interview questions? You should be good at those. If you wish. Tell me something most people don't know about you. Give me another question. Sidney smirked. Okay, fine. Tell me a time where you weren't pleased with your work and what you did about it. This is a good question. Sidney combed his fingers through his dreadlocks and smiled from ear to ear. I thought so. All right. Let me see. I haven't been displeased with my work since college, but I remember feeling confident about a Chaucer exam, and then when I went into the exam, I was wholly unprepared. I was so distraught over being unprepared that I cried during the test. Wow. Yes. I ended up with a passing grade still, but I was so upset by not being prepared that I never let it happen again. For the duration of the semester, I took thorough notes and read the assigned texts, and I believe this experience has carried through to my adult life, as I now focus on being as prepared as I can be in any situation. Very good. Tell me about something you struggled with early in your career and how you've overcome it. Warren exited the parking garage and merged onto the main street. As you may have noticed, I am a quiet person. I grew up a very shy child and a shy young man with social anxieties. I'm not surprised. I feel as though this is something I am still overcoming, but I have done much better. I am always a work in progress with it. I like it. What about yourself? What is something you struggled with early in your career? I'd probably say making friends or fitting in. I felt like an outsider at first, and honestly, sometimes I still do. When I go into these meetings with people who have seen the world and created their own business, I feel so small. Why is this? Because I've never been anywhere but the block and around the corner. I've never owned a car. I can't drive. You can't drive? Sidney shook his head. No. My mom can't either. My aunt only learned when she moved away from here. Oh. This won't do. I am going to give you a driving lesson tonight. No, it's okay. The whole driving thing makes me really nervous. It's a lot of power you're responsible for. Yes, but you need to at least know a little bit about driving. Warren squinted and pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot. Are you sure about this? Yes. I'm sure. What if I wreck your car? Warren looked around them. Wreck my car into what? Sidney exhaled in a nervous laugh. Right. Okay. Okay, what do I do first? Come around here. Warren climbed out of the driver's seat, exchanging places with Sidney, and then ducking his head inside the vehicle again. First, you need to adjust the seat. You have long legs, so. Warren reached down and manually pushed the seat backwards a few inches. Is this better? Why, yeah. Now what? Now. Let me explain the pieces of the vehicle. Warren pointed to the gear shift first. This is the gear shift. There are two different types of vehicles. There is automatic and manual, or as most people call it, a stick shift. What does that mean? It refers to the transmission type and your acceleration. If you have a manual vehicle, you have to switch to first, second, third gear. If you have an automatic vehicle, the vehicle does it on its own. Which is better? Well, manual transmissions last longer if the driver knows what they're doing, but they can make for a clunky ride. Which one do you have? This vehicle? It's manual. However, I have another vehicle that is automatic. Which one is easier? The automatic, surely, but you're learning how to drive a stick tonight. Sidney wet his lips. I already know how to drive a stick though. Did you forget already? Warren laughed, color rising to his cheeks as he turned back to the vehicle. I haven't forgotten. He cleared his throat. For a manual vehicle, you have to use both feet. You're going to put your left foot on the farthest left pedal. It's called the clutch. Then your right foot will control the brake and accelerator. Okay. Sidney shifted his feet to the proper spots and squeezed the steering wheel. Warren explained the driving process, then walked around the vehicle and sat down in the passenger seat, buckling himself in. So, whenever you're ready, you press the brake and the button to start the vehicle. Don't most vehicles come with keys that you put inside it? Warren smirked. Yes, but this is a push to start. None of your previous boyfriends offered to teach you how to drive. No. Interesting. Warren instructed him on starting the vehicle and rolling into the first gear, and they crept through the parking lot with Sidney squeezing the steering wheel and asking question after question. Once he reached the edge of the parking lot, Warren guided him through a wonky K-turn and lifted the parking brake. Sidney pressed the accelerator pedal harder, and the vehicle groaned but stayed in the same position. Ack. What happened? Apologies. I lifted the parking brake. Oh. Oh, right. This time I want you to get into second gear. No. Sidney's eyes widened and he stared at Warren. Warren ignored him. It's easy. When the RPM gets to the 2, you're going to shift to second. What happens if I don't shift? You will feel a difference in the driving. Okay. I'm nervous. You will do fine. Sidney sighed. You're sure? Absolutely. Warren touched Sidney's cheek, stroking his smooth chin. I have confidence in you. Sidney's cheeks darkened. Thanks. He descended the parking brake and cruised along again, accelerating steadily until the vehicle reached the mentioned RPM. It strained, and with clunky movements Sidney pressed the clutch and moved the gear shift. Oh fuck, he muttered. The vehicle stuttered and jerked. You have it. Ha. The car settled into second gear for a few minutes before Warren directed Sidney back down to first gear. Sidney parked across 3 parking spaces, and Warren lifted the parking brake again. I don't like driving. Sidney frowned. It's a lot to remember. For a manual, yes. An automatic is much easier. Why don't you drive an automatic then? I have one of each. You have 2 cars and you elect to drive this thing? It's the nicer one. Ooh, of course. Sidney rolled his eyes. Rich Daddy likes to drive his sports car around everywhere. A lightning bolt of pleasure went through Warren, leaving his head spinning and his cock throbbing. What was that? Sidney cut his eyes to the side. What? What did you call me? The other man wet his lips and his eyes sparkled. Rich? After that. Say it again. Sidney chewed his bottom lip. A light smile lingered on his face. Daddy? You like that? Warren rumbled. Another shock of pleasure coursed through him, and he gripped the passenger door frame, nails denting the leather finish. Maybe. Sidney glanced down at Warren's lap and then back up at his eyes. Maybe. So sir and daddy, what else? Master? No. You don't like being called master? No, it sounds pretentious. Ah. Sir and Daddy are your favorites. Do you like it when I call you sir at work? You're supposed to call me sir at work. But when I say it's sexy like. Warren lifted his eyebrows. You know when Sidney paused and looked at Warren. Warren's easy expression spread to a grin. When you. Nothing. I'm hungry. Didn't you promise me a meal? I did, but you are driving now, so take us where you want to eat. No. I'm not driving. Rush hour is over. You don't want to drive us back to your place? No way. I'm not ready for the open road. Warren chuckled. I think you are, but driving on the highway is easier than driving on city roads. I am never on the highway. All right. This concludes today's lesson then. Warren turned off the vehicle and walked around to the driver's side, opening the door. Sidney slithered out of the seat, but paused with his body between the hard aluminum of the vehicle and the soft fabric of Warren's suit. With parted lips, he trailed his eyes over Warren's form before tipping his chin up. His eyebrows quirked and his lips parted on a sigh. Thanks for teaching me the basics. Sidney braced himself against the vehicle's door, alternating his gaze between Warren's lips and eyes. Color reddened the man's cheeks. Warren watched him. You're welcome. He studied Sidney's rapidly darkening cheeks and noted the hunger in his eyes. Tempting. He was always tempting, but especially when he stumbled into situations he wasn't ready for. He hadn't been ready for this one. Warren stepped closer to Sidney, erasing the distance between their bodies, and touched the man's collar, adjusting it and smoothing his fingers over the fabric. Sidney shivered under him and sucked his bottom lip. Why yeah, he murmured. When he released his lip, it glistened in the sunlight, teasing Warren. A gasp passed Sidney's lips, a weak plea for attention. Warren knew what Sidney wanted. The man's teasing had made it obvious, and Warren wanted it too. He wanted to lift Sidney off the ground, spread him over the hood of his vehicle, and rip his clothes off. The suit was cheap anyway. Warren could replace it 100 times over with something better, something Sidney deserved. Each time Sidney's tongue rolled over his teasing honorifics, Warren wanted him that much more. His whole body ached for Sidney, and he knew there were no replacements for what he wanted. Sidney shrugged one shoulder and turned his head to the side. His dreadlocks slipped over his shoulder, running parallel to the straining muscles in his neck. His pulse throbbed under his mahogany skin. Warren pressed his lips together. We should get going. Yes? Warren cleared his throat at Sidney's prompting. We should, he croaked. Chapter 10. T had been 2 days since the cologne pitch, and 2 days since Sidney had been alone in a vehicle with Warren. They hadn't practiced driving since, but Warren had been a little better when it came to office politics. He had pruned his rules list, destroying the original and tacking the new one in its place. The boss had removed the break room rule and one other mundane rule, but he left the most important rule. Office romances still weren't allowed. Sidney, Kate's shrill voice carried through the office as she stormed up to his desk. I saw the new rules list, Kate. I'm still working on it. Besides, why do you care? You're not dating anyone, anyway. Okay, that's not what I came over here for. Oh? Whoops. Why are you over here then? Did the boss ask you about the senior creative director position? What? Sidney's eyes bulged and he turned them up to Kate. His voice kicked up an octave. No? He did, didn't he? Okay, fine, yeah. He did, but I told him you would be a better fit for the position. When did he ask you? She folded her arms across chest. I don't know, the other day. It doesn't matter. I told him I didn't want it and that you deserved it more. Why are you even bringing this up right now? Do you know the director position comes with a raise and a yearly bonus? Yes, Kate, Sidney groaned, I do. Do you not want the position? No, Sidney's laptop pinged. Hold that thought. He turned his attention from Kate to his computer screen as a chat message popped up. The message was from Warren, and he requested Sidney in his office presently. Sidney shook his head, smiling. Why are you smiling? Nothing. Hey, listen. When Joanne gets here, will you tell her I need those mock-ups for the sex toy company by the end of the day? Oh, sure. How is that project going, by the way? Just fine. I love getting product samples. Sidney winked. And you can also tell her that Project XXX is really close to being completed. Project what? Joanne breezed past them, hair whipping behind her as she slumped into her cubicle. I missed the bus this morning. She combed her fingers through her hair and rubbed her flushed cheeks. You never miss the bus. Sidney fluttered his eyelids. Joanne fished her laptop from her bag and placed it on her desk. What? Kate hollowed her cheeks. Sidney needs the mock-ups for the sex toy company by the end of business today. Joanne flushed even more. That's fine, I can get them to you. Awesome, Sidney muttered as Dean wandered into the office a minute after Joanne with a pleased expression painted on his features. Sidney's computer dinged again. Ah shit. Right. He hopped out of his seat. It was nice talking to you, Kate. I'm still working on getting the rules to go away. He looked at Joanne. Daring. I didn't think you had it in you. Joanne's face turned several shades of red and she ducked her head, shielding her eyes. I have to work now. Aha. Sidney squeezed her shoulder. I'll be back in a second. He moved down the hall, knocking on Warren's door before poking his head in. You need me? Warren frowned. Yes. What took you so long? Well, I did just get here, and I had to sort out my team. Warren's frustrations dissipated. Fine. Sidney slipped into the man's office and closed the door behind him. So what's up? The cologne company is on line 1. They have news about your pitch. What's the news? Sidney shuffled over to Warren's desk, sitting on edge. I don't know. I put them on hold and then messaged you. I wanted you to hear the news, good or bad, directly from the client. Oh shit. I'm nervous. Warren touched Sidney's thigh. Don't be. For better or worse, I still believe your materials and your pitch was excellent. Sidney wrung his hands. You should have just listened without me. Now I'm here and I'm nervous. He swatted Warren's hand away. If you're going to grow in this company, you have to get used to talking to clients all the way through the process. I know that. Sidney wrinkled his nose. I'm just saying I'm nervous. Warren chuckled. I am going to take them off hold now. Hooah! Sidney groaned, flapping his hands before settling again. Okay. I'm ready. Warren pressed a red button on his office phone, and then pressed a megaphone button. Forgive me for the long hold. Are you still there, sir? Yes, I'm here. Good. I have Mr. Powell with me now, and we're interested in hearing your thoughts on the materials we presented to you. All right. Good morning, Mr. Powell. How are you? I'm great, and yourself? I'm doing amazing, and I am the bringer of good news. I talked to the rest of the team, and we love it. We love everything you put together for us, and we were really pleased with the process too. You all made something we had been dreading very easy, and we thank you for that. What? Really? Sidney's features brightened, and a little chuckle escaped his lips. Yes. Everything is approved. I don't even know what to say right now. Sidney looked at Warren, and Warren smiled. Good job, he whispered, sliding his hand down Sidney's side. Say you will continue to maintain our advertising portfolio and budget over the next few months. Oh? Yes. Absolutely. How does a monthly report sound? It sounds wonderful. I'm excited to continue working with you. Me too. Sidney's voice trembled. If there's nothing else, I will connect you with our billing office. There's nothing else. It was good talking to you again, Mr. Powell. You too. Sidney reached across the table and pressed the hold button. Then his fingers danced across the buttons, connecting the man to their billing department, before looking at Warren. Holy shit. You worried for nothing. Warren's piercing blue eyes softened into a knowing smile. I told you that you were amazing. I know, but what? Warren cradled Sidney's face in one strong hand, urging him closer. Sidney shivered. But you always say I'm amazing. Because you are. You sound like my mom. Warren rumbled, searching Sidney's eyes. I'm definitely not your mother. His thumb stroked over Sidney's lips, parting them with the tip of his finger as he closed the distance between them. No. Sidney's pulse raced. Why, you're definitely not. Warren urged Sidney's legs apart and fit himself between them as he brought his other hand to Sidney's cheek, cupping his face with both hands and tipping his head down. He advanced on Sidney, pausing with a centimeter of distance between their lips. Warren's warm breath tickled Sidney's blazing skin, cooling it. I'm going to kiss you. Yeah, Sidney breathed. Warren closed the last bit of space, sealing his lips with Sidney's. His kiss was bruising, forceful, hungry. It was accumulation of their steamy first encounter and the last few days of consistent teasing. It was a confirmation of how much the other man wanted Sidney, of how much Sidney's teasing had affected him. Warren gripped the back of Sidney's head, holding him in place as he devoured him and tasted him. He kissed Sidney until they were both breathless, and he retreated, panting through open lips. Warren's blue eyes blazed with hunger. Sidney knew that look. You are amazing, Warren said again, confirming it. Sidney couldn't argue with him. Right now, it was Warren's way or no way. Why, yes, sir. I'm going to bend you over this desk, fuck you, and then send you back to work. Warren tugged at Sidney's belt, unfastening it, along with the top buttons of his jeans. What about me? What about you? He dipped his hand into Sidney's pants, gripping Sidney's cock in his strong hands. Sidney gasped, lidded eyes flying open and belly hollowing. His cock throbbed in Warren's hand, bubbling with a few beads of pre-cum. Sidney flailed. He grabbed Warren's hand, before yanking away from him and gripping the side of the desk instead. Warren smirked. Very good. He kissed Sidney's neck as he fondled him. I requested another toy from our client. What? Sidney breathed, nuzzling into Warren's shoulder. His cheeks warmed as he fought against touching the other man. Warren dug into the first drawer of his desk, sliding it open and revealing a sleek metal cock cage. He placed the toy on the table, and Sidney shivered. This is about your size, isn't it? Yeah. Sidney hid his face, panting and digging his nails into the desk. I want you to wear it for the rest of the day. Warren kissed his neck. Then another kiss. I will take care of you all night. Ha. You promise? Oh yes. In fact, I've already approved an absence for you tomorrow, because you're going to be very sore. Warren retrieved lubricant from his desk too, and popped open the cap. He slathered it over his fingers, running them along the inside of the cage, and then pushed Sidney's slacks down. I'm not, Sidney's eyelids fluttered, and as Warren slid the metal cage around him, his head dropped back on his shoulders. His cock throbbed against the hard sides, but Warren fit the toy around him anyway. It hurt, but the pain was exceptional. Sidney whimpered. Warren rumbled. Beautiful, he whispered, pressing his lips into Sidney's neck, lips browsing his skin. You're so beautiful. Thank you, Sidney groaned. His cock softened, but his arousal peaked. Fuck. I'm so horny. I bet. Warren urged Sidney off the desk and turned him around, shucking his slacks the rest of the way down his thighs. Cool air inspired goosebumps over Sidney's bare skin, and his cock hung between his legs, pulled down by the weight of the cage and leaking pre-cum through the oval slit. Sidney bit his bottom lip and whimpered again. I like that noise. Warren kissed the back of his neck. Sidney's pulse pounded in his ears. He was getting exactly what he wanted. He had his stuffy billionaire boss breaking his own rules in his office during working hours. Ah. Now, I'm going to pound you into my desk and you have to be quiet. Silent, or I will stop and send you back out there. Sidney's knees trembled. Ah. How is that a punishment for me? Warren rubbed the opening of the cock cage, gathering clear precum on his fingers and tasting it. I won't reward you later either. Sidney humped Warren's hand. You're mean. Perhaps. Warren raked his fingers along Sidney's bare thighs. But you enjoy it. Maybe. He kissed Sidney's neck. I'm going to enjoy fucking you now, but I can't wait until later. Warren tossed an empty condom wrapper on his desk and rubbed his sheathed cock along Sidney's entrance. Shivers ravaged Sidney's body. Why? His voice quaked. Because later I can hear your sweet noises. Without another word, Warren pushed into him. Sidney let out a burst of breath and a silent moan as Warren filled him. His stomach clenched before every muscle in his body relaxed, and he arched his back. His body begged for all of Warren as quick breaths escaped parted lips. He'd been craving it. Warren's touch, the fullness of his thick cock, the warmth through the thin film of the condom. His body needed it, and under Warren's expert touch, Sidney was alive. His eyes rolled as the man rooted inside him, digging his hips into Sidney's plush ass, stroking over his prostate, and then back again. Warren wrung more precum from him, and it dripped on his desk, staining the marbled wood. He nosed Sidney's collar aside and buried heady grunts into Sidney's sweaty skin, cooling him with each frustrated moan. He had been craving it too. Warren had been as desperate for the connection as Sidney had been. With a light smile, Sidney's eyes dropped closed and his other senses sharpened. He lived for Warren's quiet noises, the sharp sound of skin slapping skin, and the musky aroma filling the room. Warren's body against his was everything in that moment, even though he couldn't climax, even though there was no time for more. The boss was quick. After a dozen rough thrusts, he slammed into Sidney, and his movements shifted from rhythmic to mechanical as he came. Sidney felt it, the fullness, the pulsing, and it drove him wild. He was reasonably confident he had never been so aroused in his life. He was also reasonably confident the next 4 hours of work would be the longest 4 hours of his life, and he wasn't wrong. After his orgasm, Warren retreated, peeling the condom off and kissing Sidney's sweaty cheek. His blue eyes danced with a mix of mischief and adoration. Love shined in Warren's eyes, and Sidney bathed in it. He loved it. I will give you a moment, then you need to go back to work. Warren's voice was rough around the edges. His control was bridled, but just barely. Why yeah. Yeah? Sidney spun on his heels and collapsed on Warren's desk, arching his back and pressing only the tops of his shoulder blades and the curve of his ass into the wood. The cool steel of the cock cage chilled his thighs and sent him into another flurry of arousal. Warren watched him, taunting blue eyes drank him in. You are the most beautiful thing, Warren whispered, slipping a hand under Sidney's wrinkled shirt and touching his bare skin. Sidney needed the contact as much as Warren did, and he relaxed on the other man's desk, closing his eyes. I love the way you touch me. Warren flicked his fingers over Sidney's nipples, pinching and massaging them with his thumb. Sidney gasped. I love the way you respond. Warren shuffled around the room, before spreading Sidney's legs apart and slipping between them. His broad shoulders bumped Sidney's knees, and his velvety tongue lapped over Sidney's sack. Another gasp. Sidney covered his mouth with his hand, biting into the flesh of his thumb as Warren continued, moving along his sack to the rigid cage. Sidney opened his eyes and peered down at Warren as the man teasingly pressed his lips into the device. His lips continued along it until he reached the slit and Sidney's steadily leaking precum. Oh God, Sidney sobbed, features distorting with frustration. Warren lapped up the precum with his tongue, cleaning the cage before taking it and Sidney into his mouth. He met Sidney's eyes as his lips sealed around the cage. The dichotomy was maddening and tortuous. Watching Warren perform fellatio he couldn't feel had him teetering on the edge of an orgasm. Every muscle in his body nodded as Warren lavished his trapped cock with attention, and the only enjoyment he got from it was watching. It was at least an amazing, arousing, intense sight. When Warren had cleaned him, he pulled back, licking his pink lips and tucking Sidney's cock away. He zipped Sidney's slacks and stood up again. Until later. Soft whimpers escaped Sidney's throat through sealed lips, and he turned his face to the side, fixing his attention on the patterned wood grain of Warren's desk. He followed the jagged path of the darkest rings as he gathered himself, gulping deep breaths and slowing his galloping heart. Okay. Sidney peeled himself off Warren's desk and stood on shaky legs, retucking his shirt and adjusting his clothes as the other man watched. One more thing. Sidney shivered. What? Warren touched his chin, sweeping his thumb over Sidney's bottom lip and kissing his cheek. The man wanted more, Sidney could tell, but he kept a leash on his desires and handed Sidney his laptop. Let me know where you want your second round. What? Tell me where you want me to fuck you this evening. Oh. Another shiver. I'll text. Indeed. Warren pressed his lips together and walked Sidney to the door, posting himself beside it after he opened it. Chapter 11. When he closed the door to his office, he snarled. Warren had never wanted someone so much in his life. At this moment, he would have traded the business for a chance to bury himself in Sidney's ass the whole afternoon. He'd let his guard down, and now his office smelled like Sidney. Sidney's cologne clung to his clothes, and his natural scent had attached itself to everything else. Working in his office was impossible, but he had no other choice. Warren tucked himself away and reorganized the scattered papers over his desk, busying his hands as his arousal and Sidney's scent dissipated. He finally sat down behind his desk again and opened his laptop, staring at a wall of graphs and text as he drummed his fingers against the hardwood. He didn't care about numbers and conversion rates and sales stats right now. He cared about Sidney, and he pictured the other man having the same struggle at his own desk in the main room, beside his friends. He imagined Sidney holding mundane conversations with his coworkers as his cock throbbed against the cage and sweet pre-cum leaked from his slit. Warren gripped his desk as his hips bucked, and he adjusted himself in his slacks, exhaling a long, frustrated breath. The minutes dragged by until Sidney messaged him. His cell phone dinged, pulling him out of his own thoughts, and he dug it from his pocket, smiling when he saw the name. Where is your car parked? Sidney's message read. Warren wet his lips, rushing his fingers along the glass cover of the case as he debated the possibilities. A smile spread across his face and his heart pounded. In the covered parking lot, he replied. What do you say we work really late tonight, and then you give me a ride home? Work hard, play hard, right? Warren mulled over his reply, starting and stopping a dozen messages as his pulse throbbed in his ears. Sidney was so sexy, and he always knew the right combination of words to get Warren's blood rushing. Correct? But I believe I asked you where you want me to take you. And I answered. Warren's eyebrows scrunched together. Where? On in, around your car. The overpriced stick shift one. I thought you didn't like my expensive toys. It depends. On your mood. Warren abandoned his computer and sat back in his chair, smiling as he reread their messages. No. It depends on if I'm one of your expensive toys or not. Warren blinked and stared at the message. Am I? Sidney prompted. Again Warren struggled with his reply, chewing his bottom lip as he considered it. Do you want to be? It seems like you take really good care of your toys, so. I do. Exceptional care for my toys, my pets, anything in my possession. I want to be one of your possessions. Warren cleared his throat. What does that mean to you? I want to be yours. Warren rubbed his hands down his face. We should talk about it this evening, not over text messages. True, Sidney agreed, but we can talk about the rest. Of course, Warren replied. I miss your touch already. I miss yours too. And your mouth, Sidney continued, detailing everything he wanted from Warren, everything Warren had already done, and his thoughts on it too. Their texting continued through the afternoon and well into the evening, and Warren's arousal waxed and waned the whole time. His sack ached for another release, and he couldn't imagine how Sidney felt. "The office is empty," Sidney informed him 2 hours after they had closed for the day. "Come here then, my pet," Warren replied, testing the way those words felt to him. It felt right, comforting, exciting. He liked the idea of Sidney being his pet. He loved it. Sidney knocked on his door a few minutes later and slipped inside. He had already shed his blazer, but his shirt was still tucked in the trap of his slacks, and his cheap imitation leather belt still buckled. Warren placed his cell phone on his desk and curled his finger to Sidney, beckoning him forward. "How do you like me calling you my pet?" Sidney shivered as he stepped forward, lowering his warm brown eyes to the ground as he did. "I like it, but I feel like I shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because?" Sidney gestured. "Because of what we are." "Ah." Warren sucked his bottom lip and pulled Sidney closer, stroking his fingers over Sidney's palm. "You're not less than." "You're my weakness," Warren murmured, lacing his fingers through Sidney's and squeezing his hand. "Oh, I knew that." Sidney laughed. "You can stop or start the dynamic whenever you want, but I like it. I like the idea of you being mine." "Good. I like it too." The apples of Sidney's cheeks bloomed with color. Warren watched him, memorizing the details of his face and the feel of his work-roughened hands. He deserved to be taken care of. Warren wanted to take care of him. "Get undressed for me." Sidney sucked in his breath and obeyed, thumbing his buttons loose and shrugging out of his shirt. He unbuckled his belt and slid his slacks down his body too, stepping out of them and standing completely naked in front of Warren. His toes curled against the hardwood and his muscles shuddered. Warren leaned back in his chair again, appreciating his uninhibited view of the other man. "Turn around for me." Sidney smirked. "You want to see my ass, sir?" "Yes," Warren rumbled. Grinning, Sidney turned around, combing his shoulder-length dreadlocks to one side and rolling his shoulders back. The muscles in his ass tightened. "Are you going to stare at me all night or take what you know is yours?" "Whichever I choose." "I want to come before the end of the decade." "That sounds personal." Warren grabbed a handful of Sidney's ass, massaging his firm flesh and prying the twin globes apart, exposing his hole and the tight black curls around it. "It's not, because it was your idea." "Ah." Sidney arched, bracing a hand on Warren's desk as he submitted to him. "I remember." Warren dragged Sidney closer, burying his face in the other man's ass and tasting his hole. He devoured him. With each further taste, his hunger grew until he trembled in his seat. Then he tossed Sidney across his desk, scattering his papers, rocking the frame. He fucked Sidney through an orgasm, through Sidney's incessant moaning, then dragged him downstairs to the parking garage, doing it all again on the hood of his vehicle and over the trunk of his vehicle. Sidney's cries filled his ears and spurred him on. He teased and nibbled and bit the other man, showering him with affection as he took him. Warren released him from the cage on their last round, jerking him to an explosive orgasm and ushering him into the back seat. Sidney dragged Warren into the back seat as well, curling into the other man. "It's cramped back here," Warren whispered, roping his arms around Sidney's sweaty torso. "I know, but I wanted closeness before we left. I love when you fuck me hard, but I need the comfort after, you know." "The aftercare, yes." Warren rubbed Sidney's arms, petting down them and placing gentle kisses along the slope of Sidney's neck. "Yeah. That. I want to always feel special afterwards." "You will." "Good." Sidney closed his eyes and exhaled a long sigh. "So," he kept his eyes closed, "does this mean the no-office romance rule has to go?" Warren grunted, nipping Sidney's steamy skin. "Does this mean you are beyond disliking me for being well off?" Sidney cracked his eyes open and rolled them up to Warren's face. I guess yeah." "Then yes as well." "It was a dumb rule." "What?" Sidney reached behind him, raking his fingers through Warren's hair. It was a new gesture, but Warren reveled in it, turning his head to the touch and pressing his lips to the inside of Sidney's wrist, feeling his pulse. "I love you," he murmured. "Oh." Sidney's breath hitched, and he froze in Warren's arms for a split second before tentatively relaxing again. Yeah, I think I love you too. It's just soon. How do you already know? Because I trust myself, and I know. I have known since the first night we met. Really? Yes. When you looked up at me after we had our fun. I knew then that I wanted to look into those eyes every night. Sidney chuckled. I didn't peg you for romantic. I'm not. Warren squeezed him tighter. Let me take you for dinner. Okay. Chapter 12. After a solid night of fucking and Sidney spending the night at Warren's place, Sidney woke the next morning to an empty bed with a note on the bedside table, opened curtains to wide windows, and a suit hanging on the closet door handle. He snagged the note first. It read, I trust you slept well. I went into the office early, but there is breakfast waiting for you in the kitchen, and a suit for you outside the closet. It's custom tailored to what I suspect your measurements may be. Warren. Sidney shivered and folded the note before crawling out of bed. He padded across the lavish room, stroking his fingers over the light wool of the suit, and dipping into the bathroom for a shower, letting the rainwater shower head cleanse him of the previous night's festivities. His muscles ached and bruises dotted his skin, but he felt amazing. After a quick call to his mother, he ate while checking his email, dressed for work, and rode to work in the back of Warren's second vehicle, driven by Warren's personal assistant. As he stepped into the office, Joanne roped him into a hug, kissing his cheek. Oh my goodness, you did it, she squealed. Ooh, honey. Sore. Sidney groaned. Sorry. She released him and stepped backwards. You got him to relax on the rules. The dating rule is completely gone. In fact, most of them are gone except the actually reasonable ones, which leaves about 5 rules. How did you do it? Well, you know. Sidney shrugged. Anyway, does Dean know yet? Yes. I texted him. He's happy too. But seriously, tell me everything. I've been so busy with projects, and I feel like we haven't talked in forever. Joanne linked arms with Sidney as they strolled to their cubicles. There's not much to tell. We got to know each other, and it just happened. The sex toy client really helped, but I mean, how long can you really deny love? Love? Joanne's eyes bulged. Are you guys in love? Before Sidney replied, their boss dipped into the main room, arms folded across his chest, features solemn. Mr. Powell. Can I see what you've been working on for our new branding package? Sidney peered up. His heart turned over in his chest when his eyes met Warren's. He could deny his feelings all day and deny the chemistry between them, but there was no point. He nodded to Warren. Yeah, sure. 1 second, sir. Sure. Sidney turned back to Joanne. You know what? Yeah, we're in love. He smiled, grabbing his laptop and jogging over to his boss. Epilogue. 6 months later. Warren browsed the aisles of the custom jewelry store with his hands clasped behind his back. He had placed an order weeks ago and received notice that it was ready this evening. He left the office early and darted over to the establishment, reviewed it, and paid the final installment of the price. Now the custom piece was being wrapped up for him, and he was browsing the other items available for purchase. When the merchant approached, he handed Warren a neatly wrapped box and bowed to him. Your returning business alone will put my daughter through school. This is the most expensive piece yet. Who is lucky enough to receive this? My partner, of course, Warren rumbled, eyes softening as he thought of Sidney. He imagined the man stretched across the bed where he'd left him this morning, or in the shower preparing for their night out. Both possibilities excited him. Ah. Have all your recent purchases been for him? Yes? He's a lucky man. All custom pieces. I am the lucky man. He doesn't care about the gifts. Warren cradled the box in his hands, sucking in a deep breath before exhaling and lifting his lips into a smile. Anyway, I should be going. I'm sure I'll see you soon. I can't wait. I enjoy designing for you. Thanks. You do know exactly what I like. Warren turned on his heels and exited the shop, placing the box on his back seat. He weaved through traffic on the way back to his and Sidney's place, growing steadily more nervous the longer he sat in traffic. By the time he reached the house, his heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know why he was nervous, but he was. He always was. Warren stepped into the house, tossing his keys on the counter and placing the box on the kitchen table. "Sid," he called. "Almost ready. Wait, what should I wear tonight?" "What do you wear to a BDSM event?" "Generally, anything you want." Warren shrugged out of his blazer as Sidney tramped into the kitchen, stark naked, with dreadlocks framing his shoulders. The diamond of curly black hair on his chest glittered with trapped water droplets, and Sidney's cock hung between his thighs, half-mast and calling Warren's name. Warren's mouth watered. "What are you wearing?" "This." "You're not even going to change?" "I can change into another suit, if you would prefer." Yeah, I would. Besides, who goes into work on a Saturday anyway? You could have stayed home, and we could have fucked all day instead. I wanted to finish the pro bono project. You're deceptively sweet. Sidney kissed Warren's cheek. I like it. What do other submissives wear to these types of things? Warren shrugged, glancing at the box on the table before turning his attention back to his lover. A variety of things. Sometimes full clothing, sometimes undressed, sometimes whatever their dominant wants. Ooh. Is there something you'd like me to wear? You look lovely in anything. I know, but I like it when you decide what I'm wearing. You know I like for people to know I'm yours. Warren's cheeks flushed and he looked at the box again. I figured you would say that. I got you something. A gift. He tapped the box. Another one? Sidney chuckled. You get me something almost every week. You know you don't have to constantly buy me things, right? I'm not going anywhere. Sidney nuzzled Warren's jawline, nibbling his neck. I love you, not your money. I know, but it's something you could wear tonight if you wish. He picked up the box and handed it to Sidney. Sidney cradled it in his hands, sliding the linked ribbon off of it, and then lifting the top. On a bed of soft cotton sheeting sat a gold and leather piece of jewelry. It started with a thick leather collar and 2 gold chains draped from it. They formed a diamond, connecting to butterfly nipple clamps and then traveling down to a golden cock cage. Sidney grinned, running his tongue along his teeth. Of course. His dark eyes glittered and his fingers trailed over the gold. It's nice. It was expensive, wasn't it? Custom made for you. Do you like it? Yeah. I won't ever make you wear it, but if you wanted to. You're blushing, Mr. Big Time Alpha. Warren chuckled softly. It would mean a lot to me if you wore it. I know it would. Like a BDSM engagement or wedding ring, huh? Why, yes. Similar, yes. Where did you learn this? I asked some of the girls wearing collars at the events. But the thing is, I've pictured my engagement day many times, and it definitely involved someone on his knees in front of me. Warren flashed a smile. I'm always on my knees in front of you. Yes? Sidney grinned. If I get on my knees, I won't get back up without your cum in my mouth, and then we'll be late for our event. So when I get you an engagement ring, I'll be sure to propose on my knees. Ooh. You're good. Sidney chuckled. Put it on me. He handed the box back to Warren. Warren gingerly lifted the piece out of the box, fastening it around Sidney's neck first, scenting him at the same time. He swept his lips along Sidney's collarbone as his fingers trailed down the gold chains, grabbing the clamps and applying them to the other man's nipples. Sidney gasped and groaned. His cock grew against Warren's thigh and Warren seized it next. Sidney gripped Warren's bicep and lifted on his toes. Ha! His cheeks flushed. I love the sounds you make, Warren whispered, rousing Sidney's jawline as he fondled his cock, tugging him and stroking him roughly. Sidney danced in front of him, swaying with Warren's rough movements until he leaked with excitement. How long? At the end of the night, my love, you can have whatever you want. I want you. Sidney shivered. You can have me. I want to fuck you, he added, brown eyes dragging up Warren's form, meeting his gaze. Warren smiled, capturing Sidney in a rough kiss. I look forward to it.